Waukegan Public School Board of Education, District 60 special meeting on Tuesday, December 19th, 2023. If I can have a roll call, please.
Mr. McBride. Ms. Fabian. Ms. Gonzalez.
Yes.
Mr. Riddle.
Yes.
Ms. Hannah.
Yes.
Ms. Lensing. President Ewing.
Yes, we do have a quorum. I did hear from Board Member Lensing, and she will be here as soon as she can. I have not heard from Ms. Fabian yet, but I expect her to be here shortly. With that, I would like we do have public comment. We have a sign-up sheet.
Yeah, because people didn't know.
Do people want to sign up?
It was it was posted. So, seeing as there are no public comments at this time, I'd like to move to our second part of the agenda, or next part of the agenda, purchases and contracts. We have first item, renewal of partner contract with Education Potential LLC for year 5 of the EIR grant.
It is the recommendation of the administration that the Board of Education authorize the superintendent to approve the renewal contract for Education Potential LLC for 5 years of the EIR grant in the amounts of $110,000.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Riddle,
Second.
second by Ms. Gonzalez. Any comments, questions on the motion?
Yeah, I have a question on the second part that we're going to be voting on. There's a consultant involved with this, and is that going to be a 5-year contract as well?
Approaching the podium.
This is for
And is that amount included
This is year 5.
in this $110,000?
Good evening, Board President, Superintendent, members of the board, and community and colleagues. Ms. Hannah, I did not hear your question. I was walking up, so I apologize.
I just wanted to know the consultant that is working with the EIR grant.
Yes.
Okay, that's
This item here, the education potential?
Okay, there's 2, right?
Oh, yes, that's that one's for student or on the student achievement agenda. Yes.
Right, and okay, so it's not on this one.
Nope. This is a separate. I mean, this is part of the EIR grant, but the one that you're referencing, Dr. Rachel Adler.
Yes.
She's on the student achievement agenda.
Okay, and my other question was, with this grant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it still grant money, or are we now paying out of local money?
Grant money. With Dr. Zahn, we're be for another year due to the pandemic. District. Only year 5 of the grant. We were awarded this grant 2018, 19.
Right, right. And so, Brandon, excuse me. So the, okay, I've been hearing about this EIR grant, right? What, could you tell me what are the benefits that the children are getting out of this, please?
I'm going to have Dr. Zahn come up if that's okay. She, if you remember correctly, she is the employee who wrote the grant when she was working as a teacher in the district, so, or coordinator, sorry.
And this is simply information about what the grant, okay, is doing for kids.
Actually, it's a pretty intensive thing that we were able to bring to the schools and teacher or principals that were here from cohort 1. We provided furniture for STEM classrooms. We brought all new STEM curriculum, included a lot of robotics, it included a lot of training for the teachers. In addition, the teachers, a cohort of teachers, we started out with like 24 teachers, were sent to Northeastern Illinois for a computer science endorsement with the state. That was just cohort 1. We are now moving to cohort 2. So everything, all of that stuff goes right to the students. All of the curriculum, materials, robotics, furniture in the classroom. I don't know if anyone from cohort 1 is here. I see Glen Flores here. They're a school that was in cohort 1. So we split the district in half, and we did 10 schools for the first half and 10 schools for the second half.
Right, and so what are the kids doing?
Well, at the time, we didn't have a very good STEM curriculum when I wrote the grant, when I worked here as a science coordinator. So the kids are actually able to use real robotics starting in kindergarten, and the grant goes up to middle school. So we've provided really, really cool stuff for them. I guess that's the best word I can use. So it's in the hands of kids. Everything went there.
And maybe I'll get a chance, you'll invite me to see some of it.
I think that would be great. I can provide you a list of the first 10 schools. We are not starting with cohort 2 because we had an issue with a survey. This was presented to the principals, and cohort 2 will start in after they complete a survey, which we're giving out in February. The survey is a part of the grant. It's required. It's some data that's collected by the evaluator, which is a requirement of the grant.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. McBride?
Yes.
Ms. Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mr. Riddle?
Yes.
Ms. Hannah?
Yes.
President Ewing?
Yes, item approved, motion carries. We
Thank you.
now have the next item, which is the approval of the ratified SEIU cafeteria workers contract for July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2028.
It is a recommendation of the Board of Education to accept the recommendation of the administration to approve the ratified contract with the Service Employee International Union, SEIU Local 73 cafeteria workers, and to authorize the board president and secretary of the Board of Education to sign the agreement on behalf of the Waukegan Community Unit School District Number 60 Board of Education.
I motion to approve the recommendation.
Motion by Ms. Gonzalez. Second by Mr. Riddle. Any comments, questions on the motion? Thank you to those who negotiated. Obviously, this is a very small group, but we appreciate the efforts of our cafeteria staff and the SEIU cafeteria workers. With that, I'd like a roll call vote, please.
Mr. McBride?
Yes.
Ms. Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mr. Riddle?
Yes.
Ms. Hannah?
Yes.
President Ewing?
Yes, item approved, motion carries. Congratulations. With that, I'd like to call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Riddle, second by Ms. Gonzalez. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Meeting is adjourned. We now have our student achievement meeting. I'd like to call to order the December 19th, 2023 Waukegan Public School Board of Education Student Achievement Meeting. If I can have a roll call, please.
Mr. McBride?
Yes.
Ms. Fabian? Ms. Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mr. Riddle?
Yes.
Ms. Hannah?
Yes.
Ms. Lensing?
Yes.
President Ewing?
Yes, we do have a quorum. Ms. Lindsay is here. We are only missing Ms. Fabian. With that, I'd like to call for a motion to approve the minutes from the November 21st, 2023 Waukegan Public School Board of Education, or November 24th, 2023 minutes. 21st, I'm sorry.
So
Item
moved.
3A. Motion by Mr. Riddle.
Second.
Second by Ms. Gonzalez. Any comments, questions, corrections to the minutes? All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Minutes are approved. All right, we have some information items and then we have a presentation. So I'm going to go through these. Community members, again, this is your opportunity. If you have a question on a specific item, you can ask it. Same thing for Board of Education. So we have item 5A, I don't know how to pronounce that. Quident, is that correct? Contract renewal? Quadient. Good. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, Quadient. Any questions on that? All right. Item B, renewal of partner contract with NEIU for 5 years of the EIR grant.
Now, this is the same thing we were just talking about, right?
The grant is, so the specific contract, I mean, is there a specific question on this one, item 5B?
And Lee, can you pull up item B Sorry.
Yeah, and he don't need, I'm just asking.
B, sorry, Mr. White.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Yeah, I seen that. Why is there 3 parts?
Sure. So, good evening, Board President, Superintendent, Board members, members of the community, colleagues. Thank you for being here tonight. So, there are several items associated with this. There are different parts of the, to address different parts of the grant. I can ask, Dr. Nault is here, so he can answer specific questions related to each item here, but they all are associated with the same grant.
Yeah, and there's no, on this particular one, there's no, there's no fund source. It's showing here.
Okay. All 3 of those agreements, all the agreements that you've talked, that we are listed for the EIR grant, are agreements that we renew annually as part of the EIR grant. When Dr. Zahn wrote the proposal to the U.S. Department of Education, those partnerships were a part of that proposal that are required for us to maintain that grant through the U.S. Department of Ed. So we renew these, we renew them annually with the board. So that's why you see them
Well,
all.
why is it, if it's annual, so this is not a 5-year right now?
No.
We're not voting on 5 more
No, this is
years.
just year 5 of the grant.
Year
And these are the
5
contracts
of-
for the year 5 of
Okay.
the grant. And the funding source is all paid, they're all paid out of the EIR grant. All the contracts are paid out of the grant.
It would
So-
be, it would be really nice to have that there, sir, to see
I thought I had it on the attachment.
the
Okay.
funding source.
It'll, when you, next week when you vote, it'll be listed
Thank
in the
you.
funding source. You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
Yep.
Thanks. We'll make sure to put that in the slide as well.
Item 5C, renewal of the partner contract with Lake County Road for year 5 of the EIR grant. Item 5D, approval of Dr. Rachel Adler contract for year 5 of the EIR grant.
And what is her, what salary is that? And is that out of the grant as well? Her salary is coming out of the grant?
Doesn't a portion of it come
Hi, all of that comes from the grant. Dr. Rachel Adler worked with me. She was a professor at Northeastern Illinois University. She has since been accepted to work at University of Illinois Urbana. So we had to pull the 2 apart. It is a separate contract. We need to continue to have her on the grant. We have to keep key personnel until we're done with our 5th year. This was approved by the U.S. Department of Education, and they said it's a normal process that people, when they write grants, take different positions. Even myself, I've taken a different position as well within the 5-year period.
So where is her salary coming from?
It's a consultant, it's not a salary, and it's coming from the grant. All the money comes from the grant.
Go ahead, Mr. McBride.
If she's working somewhere else, I heard you mention, how many hours is she working for us? And what's the time frame?
So she's still our NEIU contact. So she still has that position even though she's at another university. So right now we have 14 teachers, elementary through high school, that are in cohort 2 taking coursework. She is the one who is our contact to the university. She's the one who designed the courses. So she still does her old position. She just is at a different university. That's the person I email. I know it's hard to believe. Northeastern knows when you have a grant and you just left a position, you still have to work on the grant that you had. We can't transfer the grant, so we had to just keep her on.
So she's not physically here. She's actually, like you just said, you emailing her and she's
Yeah.
working through.
And all of our meetings are virtual, so she's part of our management team. Our meetings have been virtual because our grant was approved in 2019, and 2020 we started going virtual, and we just continue to keep our meetings virtual.
And her compensation?
It's the same compensation that she had when she was with
What is it,
Northeastern.
Ms.
I think it's
Dr.
14.
Zahn?
19.
19,000.
Is that for 2 years? Or is that, yeah, 19.7, I'm sorry. That includes a travel budget that we need. We are required to attend the project directors and evaluators conference in DC. It's a requirement of the grant. So she included $3,000 for the next 2 years to attend that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Item 5E, attendance for the National Higher Education Association Annual Conference in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The information of the items are there. Are there any questions?
And who the people going?
Can we pull up the attachment?
Miss Sampras.
Hmm?
Miss Sampras. Oh, it's not on there. It's at the bottom.
Miss Sampras.
So she's photography.
Oh,
The high
she's
school.
photography at the high school.
I'm sure she does other things. I apologize.
Mhm. Okay.
We can notate that Ms. Fabian has joined the meeting at 6:20.
How are you? Good. What's this one for?
This is CTE teacher.
They're not throwing it now.
Yeah. Okay. It's just one person, the teacher, the photography teacher, correct? Yeah, the photography teacher. Okay.
All right. You get the agenda pulled back up. All right, item 5F, the new WHS course for CTE Advanced Placement Photography. Comments, questions? Item G, new Waukegan High School course CTE Sports and Entertainment Marketing. Item H, new WHS course CTE Future Educators. Excited to see that one.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo the excitement that this is going to be part of our CTE programming, so that we have students that are ready for the field as they're going into college to strengthen those skills. So I really appreciate seeing that on here.
Awesome. Item I, National Association for Bilingual Education Conference.
Thanks.
Item J, AASA Conference, Nelson Campos, Juarez Middle School. All right, thank you. We're now at our time for presentations. So, Deputy Cesario.
Okay, I'm going to ask Dr. Brown and Dr. Null to come up.
Do you need
Getting my steps in tonight. Okay. Good evening, everyone, again. So tonight, Dr. Brown and I will be presenting on two things. I'm going to start off by presenting on the Illinois State Report Card and some of our schools' designations. Dr. Brown will follow with our beginning of year data. That'll also get into some more detail of some of the metrics that were a part of those designations, if that makes sense. Lee, can I have you go to the next slide, please? The first couple slides are just our district's mission, vision, our core values. You can skip through those, Lee, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here's the agenda items for this evening. Again, starting out with the report card. Dr. Brown will be getting into some of the performance metrics associated with IAR, SAT, We have some NWA scores in there as well, so you'll see some of those. Next slide. Again, if you are interested in finding out information about any school in our district, any school in the state of Illinois, you can go to illinoisreportcard.com, simply type in the district name of the district, the name of the school, and you can have immediate access to their report card by going to the website. Next slide. Once you get in there, there's a menu of items on the left-hand side, or a table of items on the left-hand side. You can see them listed there 1 through 9. When you click on those different sections, drop-downs will occur. Drop-down for other options will occur, where you can kind of dig deeper into each data point that's kind of aligned to that particular area. So academic progress, if you click on that, next slide, Lee, you'll see these are all the metrics that come up when you click on academic progress. And again, you can see this for every school, every district, and you can start to look at those individual data points. It allows you to look at historical data. So if you want to look at previous years, you can do that. You can filter it by different student groups. There's a wide range of ways that you can look at it once you actually get in the report card and start diagnosing some of the metrics. Next slide, please. One of the things that we wanted to highlight with our report cards was that there's the metrics that you see here, the IAR proficiency, both in ELA and math, SAT proficiency in ELA, our freshmen on track, our graduation, our attendance, chronic absenteeism. Despite our designations that we've had in the district, our school designations, for the last 3 years, our district has made improvements in these areas. 3 consecutive years, our district has made improvement in these areas. So you'll see on the next slide where it breaks down, it shows you essentially where we were a couple years ago, where we are this year as it relates to these metrics. And these metrics are important because they contribute directly to the designations that schools get on the report cards. But it also just speaks to the fact that we're seeing continual progress in some of these metrics over time, which is really important when you're trying to implement continuous improvement, change, those kinds of things. So you'll see that we have 3 years of growth in these areas. I won't read those numbers to you, mainly because I can't see them from this far away, but you'll see kind of how we progressed over the last several years. If you look even historically, you'll see that we are inching back to those pre-pandemic levels in some of our assessment scores. So that's positive to see that as well. When it comes to designations, there are 5 different categories. 4 have historically been in play. There's a 5th one that's new this year. Exemplary is the highest category or designation you can get from ISB. The second highest level is commendable, followed by targeted, followed by comprehensive, followed by intensive, which is a new designation this year. We have no schools that are in that intensive support this year, which is good, but we do have schools that fall into those other categories, which I'm going to get into here on the next couple of slides. If you're curious about what metrics determine a school's designation, this is for our elementary and our middle schools. You can see that there's academic indicators, and I have them broken down by the weight in terms of how they're weighted towards those individual school designations. So if you look, there's a huge emphasis obviously on growth on the IAR. For ELA and math, that accounts for 25% respectively, 50% total of a school's designation. And then you have proficiency rates, you have our access scores, which is the ELPTP, our science proficiency, and then there's school quality indicators. This is where you get into chronic absenteeism and the 5 essential survey data, et cetera. So these are the 8 metrics that make up a designation for our elementary and our middle schools and their corresponding weights.
So are these percentages, are those hours?
Nope, these are percentages that are determined by the state for every elementary school and every middle school in the state of Illinois. This is the breakdown of the indicators of how they achieve their designation. So these are all set by the state.
Dr. Null, could you define chronic absenteeism again, since that's a heavy
Sure.
one there?
So chronic absenteeism is any student that has missed more than 18 days of school, excused or unexcused. The state changed the definition, I think it was like 2 years ago, where they changed the definition from chronically truant to chronically absent, With chronically truant, you've only missed 5% of the school year, and chronically absent is 10% of the school year. So 18 days out of 180, whether it's excused or unexcused, that's the key. That's one of the major shifts. If a student misses more than 18 days, then they do count as a chronically absent student in that school. So this is something that I know the principals have probably been communicating to parents, the importance of, number one, just being in school overall. But even if it's an excused absence for a doctor's appointment, for a funeral, it still counts against that chronic absenteeism rate. So we're obviously encouraging parents to have students in school every day. Next slide will show you the indicators for our high schools. So high schools are in a completely different, they have different metrics associated with their designation. Again, if you look, there are 8. The highest weighted metric for high school is the graduation rate. All right, the state wants to see that we're graduating students, so 50% of their designation is allocated toward graduation. Then they have proficiency on the SAT, both in ELA and math. Again, they have the access scores, science, the science assessment, and then school quality indicators. Again, you'll see chronic absenteeism, freshmen on track, and the 5 essentials survey. So that is the breakdown of the high school designation and the corresponding weights that are applied to each metric there. This is a table that shows where our schools' designations ended for this past school year. So you'll see we had for our elementary schools, we had 11 schools that fell into that commendable category, 2 schools that fell into the targeted, and then 2 schools that fell into comprehensive. And there's slides later on in the deck that I'll show you that if you look at some of our schools that did fall into that targeted and that comprehensive, the targeted range for sure, that they had enough points to be commendable, but there was maybe 1 student group or 2 student groups that were performing lower than the lowest 5% of the state, so that automatically brings them down. No matter how many points index points you accumulate, you cannot get a commendable status if you have 1 student group that's underperforming in your school. So you'll see I have a visual that kind of shows you what that looks like across the district. So this is the breakdown for our elementary schools. Here's our middle school and our high school. We had 2 schools that fell into the targeted category, and then 4 that fell into that comprehensive category.
I thought we had an exemplary.
We did. Clark was 1 school that had a decrease in their designation this year.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Next slide. This table essentially just, I wanted to show the board and community, of course, where the 2-year comparison. So this, to answer your question, Ms. Hannah, this is where you'll see where Clark's designation was last year, what the priority student group was, and then where their designation is this year, and what their priority student groups are for this year. Okay, so just so you can do kind of a 2-year side-by-side comparison of where they were, and you can kind of see, we had several schools that maintained. We had 12 schools that maintained their designation from 21-22 to 22-23, and we had, I think, 9 that decreased in their designation.
What's going on with Carmen?
Are we holding or are we?
Dr. Brown's going to get he's got school level data that when he presents, he'll show you, there'll be school level data there. So you can possibly look at some of that data and have some questions available for, we do have the principals here as well, so they could possibly speak to some of the things that they're experiencing. Superintendent and Mr. McBride.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if we could hold questions till we get to the slides, what you're going to see is that we will take a deep dive on specific schools, Ms. Hannah, like Carmen or Clark, and you'll see how those ratings came out and the why.
Next slide, please, Lee. Here's our elementary schools continued. Again, it's that side-by-side 2-year comparison. So you can see the previous year's designation, current year's designation, and then priority student groups. Now, if you're commendable, where you see all those NAs up there, if you're commendable, you don't have any priority student groups because all your student groups are performing at the state's. They're performing at the level that is not either in the top 10% or the bottom 5%. Next slide, please. Same slide. This is just representative of our middle school and our high school. So you can see here our middle schools where they were 21-22, and our high school and where they ended up for 22-23, and the student groups that have contributed possibly to those designations. Next slide, please. So the next couple of slides, you'll see these are visuals for distribution at the state level. So the next slide will be high schools. So I have to turn around to see this actually. So what you see here is this is the statewide distribution. So when you look at this visual, you'll see on the far right is there's that green box that says these are the top 10% of the schools in the state. You see on the far left is that red box, so the bottom 5%. And then you'll see lines, those benchmark or lines that are on there. Those determine whether you're exemplary, commendable, targeted, or comprehensive. So if you're on the far right, if you're to the right of that line and it's on the right-hand side in that green area, you're in the top 10%. Your index score is the top 10% of the state. If you're in the bottom, on the far left, closer to that red box where that cut line is, you're in the bottom 5% of the state for performing high schools. Everything else in the middle is commendable. Oh, is this elementary? I'm sorry, this is elementary. Same concept. It's the same concept, but there's cut marks for exemplary and commendable and targeted and comprehensive. So for example, what you'll see here is I just put an example. When you go to the, like, if you go to Clark's report card and you click on one of those tabs that I was showing you, you can see exactly where Clark falls in this distribution, if that makes sense. So you'll see what their index score was, you'll see kind of how they compare to schools across the state, and either how close, how far they were to exemplary, how close, how far they were to targeted, etc. You can kind of get a better visual of where they fall in comparison to other schools in the state. So if you look at those yellow bars, if you look right under, Clark had 74.46 index for an index score. So 13.6% of the schools in the state, elementary or middle schools in the state, fell in that same category as Clark. That's what those yellow bars represent going across the bottom. And these are all graphs and visuals that were put together by ISBE. These aren't Waukegan charts. These are just charts that I pulled off the report card so you can visually see, you know, as a principal, I want to see where my school falls in comparison to other elementary schools and middle schools, and I want to see how close I am to those cut scores to either be exemplary or, you know, if I'm trending downward, you know, if I, you know, where I need to have some positive growth to maintain that commendable score if I want to maintain my commendable designation. Next slide. This graph shows you across our district, all of our elementary schools. That green line that you see across the top, again, that's that exemplary cut line. And the red line that you see going kind of through the middle is the targeted comprehensive. So what you'll see here is we have several schools that a lot of our elementary schools were commendable anyway, but you can kind of see where they fall in between those ranges of being close to exemplary and or close to being targeted. The schools that are below the red line, those are schools that decrease in designation. I think it's Oakdale. Oakdale and Lyon is right there, but Oakdale, for example, they're below that red line, so that's they have a designation of comprehensive. Next slide. Same thing for our middle schools. Again, you can see the green line is the cutoff for exemplary, and the red line cutoff for being comprehensive, and everything in between. And you can see where our middle schools fall in that distribution.
Dr. Now, I hope you're going to get to it later in the presentation, but can you go back one slide? And it's not a question, but if you, and I hope I'm looking at this right, but I think if you look at Carmen, their scores are in the commendable range, right?
Yes.
And you're going to explain that why later.
Yep.
Okay.
So if you want to stay on this slide, if you do look at Carmen, they have a 43.7 was their index score. So they fall technically into that commendable range, but again, they had a student group that was, because that student group was underperforming, and fell beneath that red line, so they had a student group that fell beneath that red line, that means that they can't be in that commendable range. They have to be considered comprehensive. Next slide. So here's our middle schools. Same exact chart, same concept. And the next slide is our high school. So this is that same visual for across the state distribution, where you can see where Waukegan High School fell compared to other high schools in the state. Again, you're always going to have that top 10%. You're always going to have that bottom 5%. What differs every year is what that cut score is. That cut score can change every year by 1 or 2 points. So I don't remember the scores off the top of my head from last year, but I know some of those we've seen movement in the cut scores. So that kind of determines where your school or your schools fall, depending on that top 10% or that bottom 5% and everything else in between. But again, here's an example where the high school has enough points to be commendable. They're in that commendable range, but they have a student group that fell below that, that bottom 5%. Next slide. Here's another visual of the same thing of the high school. So you can see, again, that green and that red and kind of the number of the index score that they received and where those cut scores were for them. So just wanted to paint a picture for you guys visually of what these designations look like. So you can see, number one, how our schools compare to different schools across the state. When Dr. Brown comes up, he's going, or his video recording is going to show you not only how our schools performed on the assessments, but he'll also compare us to like districts that are in this area and districts that have similar demographics to us. So you can see how Waukegan's performing comparable to, you know, Rockford and Zion and North Chicago and Round Lake and some of those other districts that are here. So you'll see that in his presentation. Next slide, please. And these are just resources that I linked in here if you're curious. You can subscribe to the report card at isb.net mailing list, and you'll get updates about the report cards. You'll get information about report cards. If you subscribe to that mailing list, you'll get those things automatically. And they'll, you know, they send you definitions of metrics. They have a weekly rundown that they send out all the time that talks about different things that are happening with the school report card. So you can subscribe to those emails if you like. And then there's just other resources linked here. All right, Dr. Brown.
Good evening, President Ewing, Superintendent, members of the board, and community. The presentation is recorded for you, and then after that, then we'll be able to answer questions and talk about it. All right. Good evening, President Ewing, Superintendent Placencia, members of the board, and community. My name is Dr. Jonathan Brown, alongside Dr. Jason Nault. Dr. Nault has taken you through the summative designations for our district. For the remainder of our time, I'll continue to go through some state ELA and math performance updates. We'll take a look at some comparisons with other districts, some growth percentiles, and then we'll go into our district local measures of reading and math. For the most part, what you'll see tonight are overall performances by grade level, and some will be by school. We'll take a look at kindergarten and first grade oral reading, and then we'll end with a few district highlights and some action steps for improvement. For the remainder of our time, we will review other metrics from the state report card and end with the district level beginning of the year measures. Here, we start with ELA and math performance at the high school level. As noted earlier, with Dr. Nault's presentation, each is worth 7.5% of the total score of the school's report card. Here we have math performance on grade 11 SAT. Nearly 5% of students met or exceeded standards on the math section this year. This is a decrease from the previous 2 years. In ELA, 9% of students met or exceeded standards on the ELA section of the SAT in 2023. This is the second year in a row with an increase in performance. Often we are asked, how do our students' performance compare with other schools in Illinois? Here, Waukegan High School's performance is shown in purple among a sampling of large Illinois high schools and high school districts. These large districts and schools have populations that are comparable to Waukegan or are in our immediate area. Statewide, 26.7% of students met or exceeded standards in math, while 31.6% met or exceeded standards in ELA. Moving on to the elementary and middle schools, we see report card performance now includes proficiency on the IAR as well as growth on the IAR. Growth is measured from year to year and aggregated at the school level. Here we have IAR math performance overall. The percentage of students testing proficient across the district on IAR in math has increased each year since 2021. That's from 7% to 11%. In ELA, the percentage of students across the district meeting or exceeding standards on the IAR ELA section has increased each year since 2021 also, from 12% to 14%. As with the high school, here we see Waukegan students' performance on IAR compared to similar districts such as Elgin, North Chicago, Zion, Rockford, Beach Park, Round Lake, and state averages. The data is arranged in terms of combined percentages, ELA plus math. This is our first time viewing a graphic with IAR growth. IAR growth accounts for 25% of the school's designation score. Students' growth is assessed by comparing their performance to similarly performing students and ranking their growth within that group. All students that have 2 test scores receive a growth percentile. That growth percentile is compared to the state average, which is set at the 50th percentile. All growth percentiles from within a school are combined to form a school's growth percentile. This is what you see on the screen now. On the left are math results, while on the right, we have ELA results. The district's average growth percentile was 44.7% for math and 41.3% for ELA. In math, 9 schools demonstrated growth greater than the state average. They are noted on the screen: Clark, McCall, North, Hyde Park, Whittier, Little Fort, Greenwood, Glen Flora, and Clearview. In ELA, 4 schools demonstrated growth greater than the state average. Those schools were McCall, North, Hyde Park, and Whittier. In addition to math and reading, the state also requires the measuring of student performance in science. The Illinois Science Assessment is given to students in grades 5, 8, and 11. It accounts for 5% of the designation score for a school. 11 schools, including Waukegan High School, have proficiency rates higher than the district average of 30.5%. Over half of the 5th graders at Cook and Clark Elementary Schools tested proficient last year. Teachers across the district have been working hard to help our English learners gain proficiency in English as measured by the Access for EL's yearly assessment. The access test is required each year for English learners until they earn a composite score that demonstrates proficiency. Once they take their first test, the state calculates a growth trajectory for each individual student that represents the progress that should be made each year to reach proficiency within 5 years. A student's access score is compared to the expected score to determine how much progress has been made by that student. All students receive an ELPTP score, which are aggregated to determine a school score that is worth 5% of their designation. The scale ranges from 0 to 100, with 100 indicating expected growth was met. Students in the elementary grades tend to grow at a much faster rate than those in the middle school and above. Now let's move to student attendance data. On this slide, student attendance is viewed at the elementary, middle, and high school levels for all of the district buildings. As you can see, attendance figures at each level are higher this year than last and approaching pre-pandemic levels. Elementary levels are highest, followed by students in the middle grades and then students in the high school. Our district average at the time that this data was taken was 90.2%. Chronic absenteeism is a new metric for us to display, but accounts for 20% of a kindergarten through 8th grade school's designation score and 10% for a high school. Across the district, 7 schools have chronic absenteeism rates below 30%. The statewide average is 28%. 43% of students across the district were chronically absent last year. Chronic absenteeism is defined as missing 10% or more of school days during the year, either with or without a valid excuse. That can amount to 18 or more days missed per year. Now let's take a look at our beginning of the year local measures. We do screen at the beginning of the year to get a sense of where students are performing, to set a baseline for growth for the year, and to inform instructional grouping. Screening results for the beginning of the year in math show nearly 40% or more of the students in each grade, 1st through 8, demonstrate a need for additional supports in math. In the far right 2 columns, we see counts of students with the potential for meeting standards on the spring IAR. Typically, students scoring in the 70th percentile or more range are in a good position to meet or exceed standards on the IAR. Screening results for the beginning of the year in reading in English show 39% or more of the students in grades 2 through 8 demonstrate a need for additional supports in reading in English. Again, the 2 columns on the far right show students with the potential to meet or exceed standards on the spring IAR. Screening results for the beginning of the year in reading Spanish shows 37% or more students tested in 3rd through 8th grade demonstrate a need for additional supports in reading in Spanish. These students are not only working to gain proficiency in English, but are also working to gain proficiency in Spanish, resulting in an award of the Seal of Biliteracy when they graduate. Now on to our K-1 grades and their early literacy performance. These results consist of NWEA MAP fluency and amplify reading measures in Spanish and English with performance categorized in these particular areas. Phonological awareness for kindergarten, phonics and word recognition for kindergartners, word reading fluency for first graders. With the increased support being given to teachers of our Tier 1 phonics programs, beginning of the year screening was not required so that full implementation of the Tier 1 program could begin. The results presented are of those that participated in testing. Here we have student performance on similar phonological awareness portions of the tests. 35% of students tested scored at or above the fall benchmark in English, while 44% of the students tested scored at or above the fall benchmark in Spanish. Approximately 40% of students tested demonstrated a need for additional supports in reading this fall. Finishing up with kindergarten, in the area of phonics word recognition, we see about a quarter of students tested in English scored at or above the benchmark. In Spanish, approximately 11% of students tested scored at or above the benchmark. At the beginning of the year, it is not possible for students to be rated as well below in this particular area in kindergarten. As the expectation level increases through the year, it becomes possible to show well below status. In first grade, of those students that tested, approximately 35% scored at or above the benchmark in English, and 41% scored at or above the benchmark in Spanish. 37% of students tested in English and 29% of the students tested in Spanish show a need for additional supports. The next few slides take a moment to mention a few highlights of the work being done across the district on behalf of our students in order to help them succeed. In kindergarten through 5th grade, we have begun to have monthly Data One collection and reviews by student and grade level on Tier 1 foundational skills that is helping with implementation and intervention enrichment planning for students. We have seen evidence of strong professional learning cycles in schools focused on specific strategies such as inquiry, teaching to student misconceptions, and small group instruction. ELA and math scores continue to grow at a rate that exceeds state growth averages in multiple schools. 5 schools entered into lesson research this year for enduring development of deep teacher inquiry and collegial discourse. WPS 60 elementary teachers using Erickson Math and Everyday Math are recognized and spotlighted nationally. McCall, Greenwood, and Littlefort elementary schools have received recognition from the Blue Ribbon School of Excellence as Lighthouse of Excellence and Beacon of Light schools, respectively. ELA coordinator Nicole Mackey has been recognized with Illinois' Those Who Excel Award. Math coordinator Matthew Foster was named as national speaker at the 2023 NCSM conference highlighting lesson research at WPS 60. Instructional rounds are occurring for grades 9 through 12 with feedback and support given by department chairs. The development of written and aligned curriculum guides for grades 9 through 12 is occurring. Freshman success team implementation is increasing based on teacher survey results from not practicing yet to emerging practicing. Algebra supports our interventions at the high school is producing results above average for the first semester this year. This slide should look familiar to most of us as it outlines the Disciplinary Literacy for All initiative, where we are working together to create building-based teams of experts in literacy, frameworks for teaching and learning, and providing additional on-site support. Through this initiative, we will engage, equip, and empower building-based teams of experts with monthly professional development in line with evidence-based reading practices, sometimes referred to as the science of reading. We will provide teachers and leaders with frameworks for teaching and learning to support a collective vision for core instruction. Included in the frameworks will be an outline to the core curriculum, high-yield instructional models, and professional development available to support teachers and leaders. Monthly support visits with schools to provide on-site collaboration and support. These visits will include 2 hours of collaborative conversations, classroom visits and planning, interdisciplinary teams, collaborative problem solving and feedback, and Tier 1 data analysis and action planning in line with monthly goals for school-based professional learning communities. Additional action steps for schools include continuing on-site tutoring with teachers and TutorMate, and strengthening our teachers' ability to utilize the K-5 phonics curriculum effectively. Orton Gillingham training for instructional coaches and instructional support teachers will continue. GLAD training for all teachers with pre-K through 8 and high school being added this year. 95% phonics implementation professional development. Question and answering sessions for teachers. Administrator training for building leaders and coaches. Okay. Explicit 30 writing block implemented daily in K-5 classrooms. Thank you for your time and continually supporting our students.
Thank you. Now we're open for any questions.
I want to start off with acknowledging that when we are talking about the success of our children, it's a three-pronged approach. Parents or guardians, so the home, the system that we're operating in, and then in teachers. So I just want to make it very clear that these results are not a direct reflection of solely our teachers. So I want to make sure that's clear before we enter in this conversation, so there's no finger pointing. What I'm lacking out of the presentation is the why. So to be more specific, if we go to slide 14, Carmen and Clearview and Lyon, I want to know specifically why we are in these designations. How did this happen, especially when we look at, I'm pulling it up for myself as well. When we look at Carmen, it was commendable and it dropped down to comprehensive. And we can say, and I understand that if they have a group that drops them down, they get that. I understand that. But why did those students drop? That's what we're not getting out of this presentation. And the trend that I'm seeing is DL pops up a lot. Black students are popping up in a lot of these categories as well. And then we have some all students and some EL students. So again, what I'm missing from this presentation is why has it dropped for those groups for that to bring the whole school down?
I can give you my thoughts on that.
And then Dr. Brown, can you just speak into the mic a little bit? Thank you.
When we're talking about, and there are specific reasons that a school may be able to give you, but when we're talking about smaller groups like this, because you have to have at least 20 kids to be considered a student group for it to even count. So let's say we're talking about 25 kids, even 30 kids. Last year, those fifth graders moved to sixth grade. So you have a new group of kids that are moving in. So you have third graders, fourth graders, and fifth graders that are going to be new this year. So you have a different bunch that may also affect that that score. But having a smaller count makes it much, much easier to affect whether or not that group of students is going to meet the score or not meet the score. As an example, we were looking at some data today in the room, and we noticed that a student group was showing 70% proficient. And we thought, oh, well, let's look into that group. Let's find out more about what that group is made up of. There were 7 kids in the group. So smaller numbers can have a large impact. I don't know what the black group for this school, what their overall score was. For example, Dr. Nault showed you that you needed to have 35.31 or something like that to get over the cut score. I don't know if that number is 34 point something, how close they were to that particular cut, but the smaller counts do make a difference, and even with that grade level changing for them. I'm not saying that it should drop them down, but it's something that can have an effect on that.
And
So, sorry, so have we analyzed to verify that it is due to smaller group numbers? That's what I want out of this, is that yes, we had this great presentation, it's very thorough data to talk about what those points are, but did we go deeper? Did we look at it and say, okay, this happened because we went from 20 DL students down to 15. So I understand that when you deal with a smaller population, it's a little harder to move those numbers depending. But I want to make sure that we're going in on that deeper dive, because I think that's the meat and potatoes that the community wants to hear, that the board wants to hear, that parents want to hear. So that's what I want out of these presentations personally.
Dr. Brown, can I help? And I'll let you finish. A very good question, Ms. Lenzing, and I would say I know the answer is yes. And each school, we do have some of our principals here this evening, take a deep dive, whether it's with me, the area superintendents, the deputies. As a matter of fact, just because I know Mr. Silva and I had this conversation, I believe, last week, but also when these ratings came out and we were looking at our ratings together and having this conversation, can I ask you to come up and also explain around the DL and the subgroups, the student groups? But I want you to finish your thought, Dr. Brown, because I did cut you off and I apologize for that.
I was going to say those two things. First, the data dives that you all are doing and that the schools are doing, having to look at their individual student groups, identify who those kids are, and track their progress. That is happening at the school. But I still wanted to also stress again about that. It wasn't about going from 25 down to 15. If there were 15, they wouldn't be listed on there, and they would have stayed in the commendable area. It's just the fact of smaller groups, no matter who's in it, there's a big impact on when 1 or 2, 3, 4 of those kids have a change versus when you have a group of 70.
Yeah, it's just I personally doubt that that's the sole reason. And if I, as a board member, am out in the public and I have someone come up to me and say, hey, listen, I really want my kids to stay in Waukegan schools, but this is how they're performing, I need to be armed with this information so that I can help them in that moment and then redirect back to individuals to say, you can get more information here. But to just say, oh, you need to reach out to so-and-so, that's not helping that person in the moment. I'm sorry, Mr. Silver, you were going to come up.
I had wanted to ask.
Yeah, I know. We gonna wait.
wanted to
I don't
ask
want to
Mr.
confuse the conversation, so let's allow the response to Ms. Lindsay, and then we'll go to Ms. Fabian, who was waiting, and then we'll go to Ms. Hannah.
So on the slide that indicated the groups of students who have given us our rating, right? Their
Lee, can you
performance.
pull that back up, please?
So if we look there, yes. So according to
What slide is that, so they can pull it up,
slide
please?
number 15.
Thank you.
So in 2018, Carmen Buckner was part of a cohort for school improvement with the state. At that point, we were, what was it, comprehensive, targeted for both groups. Sorry?
They're not seeing what, it's 14.
2014?
No.
Slide 14,
so
sorry.
they can see what you're talking about.
2018, we were part of a cohort in which we had 2 subgroups that were designated targeted: our Black students and our diverse learner students. Through the course of those 4 years, we had some programming changes that we did. We were experimenting at Carmen, and our diverse learner student came off as a subgroup that was targeted. And then following that was our Black student group. And then this year we regained our diverse learner group. And it's basically, there's different students moving. So 3rd grade scores don't count for the growth until they're in 4th grade. So the 4th graders, 3rd grade scores are compared to how they performed in 4th grade. So that's measured for each group of students: EL students, diverse learners, Black students. And so we're a little bit below the threshold of 35.53 for the index score. But just to note, our Black student group is above that threshold. It is not a targeted group, but because we were part of that 2018 cohort and one of our subgroups still remains as targeted, our DL subgroup, both subgroups are now, our school is comprehensive designation, and we got to ensure our school improvement plan addresses those student groups. But part of the process that we've been involved with the state, with our area superintendents, is first doing an assessment of our school. So this past District Institute Day, my entire staff participated in utilizing the Illinois Quality Framework that's provided by the state. And we assessed ourselves. Where do we need to improve for each subgroup? Where do we need to improve as a school as a whole? In our systems, in our instructional practice, in our behavior systems. And from there, we actually have a meeting tomorrow with the state to begin the next step of the process, is defining a root cause analysis process that we will do with our staff as well as with the state representative. So we begin that process tomorrow.
Thank you so very much, because I find that information way more helpful to understand the information and where our schools are at. So thank you, Mr. Silver, for coming in and talking about it.
No problem. Thank you.
Ms. Fabian.
So a couple of things. One of the things that Mr. Silva mentioned was that they were in 2018 down into comprehensive and I believe comprehensive or targeted. We're comparing our students on different tests. We're not comparing them apples to apples. So what the community needs to know is that in 2018, students were tested in PARCC. They were not tested on the IAR. And the IAR and the PARCC are significantly different tests. So when we're rating the growth, to me, it's a little unfair because I started you off testing on this and now you're testing on this. That's one thing. The other thing we need to note is growth and attainment. The difference in that vocabulary, right? Attainment is we got it, we met the metric, and growth is how far did we move up. And I want to say congratulations to everyone because everyone did make growth. We can see that we had been moving up in the data. I also want to point out that the term report card is very, very misleading because when we give report cards to our students, we're giving them a grade where we're evaluating them in comparison to themselves, in comparison to the work that they are doing. So everyone in the room can get an A. Everyone in the room can be exceptional. Everybody could also fail, right? But a report card, the Illinois report card isn't that way. It's relative, which means that that score, that goal that you're trying to hit changes every year dependent on your top school. So there's always, no matter what you do, going to be a top 10%. No matter what you do, there's going to be a bottom 5%. And so our schools are always going to change. Your status will change yearly. That's why these are when they're giving out, that's the first thing that they tell you is your status may change, because that score changes of where that cut score is changes every year. It's relative. It's in comparison to every other school district, all 856 of them, all 4,000 schools in the state. So I think just for community's sake, the understanding of the terms and how we're measured needs to be a little bit clearer, because when I think report card, I think how well did I do for myself, but that's not how report card in Illinois is. It's relative. And so that being said, yes, your designations can or may change year to year because your goal changes from year to year. So I just want to make sure that everybody kind of understands that, on top of the fact that metrics have changed over the years. So now the different scores that we're looking at, or the different indicators that we're looking at, and the weights of those indicators have also changed throughout the years. So again, it's not a very apples to apples clear-cut picture to what we've been doing all along.
So I just want to add a couple things to that. So yes, it will be important to know what each of the indicators are and how they're combined and all. The state, in my opinion, tries to make it as easy as possible to communicate how a school or a district is doing in terms of bringing all types of relevant, combining relevant data and not just saying it's based on your test score. We should go ahead and make sure that all of those metrics are clear. I tried to kind of do that in the presentation a little bit, but just know that the data that we're looking at current data. We just mentioned about 2018 and making a comparison to that, but that was only in terms of where the person's status was at the last 5 year or whatever that was. The data that's on there now, we are talking about this year's data, we are talking about last year's data, we're talking about the growth between those two years. So it's information that's relevant to people right now and to the schools right now. That's what I would add to that. Yes, Ms. Hanning.
Okay, you guys keep talking about these student groups, okay, that are causing the designations to go down, okay? DL students, right? You got black students, right? You got brown students, right? And so are the black and brown students, are they special education students? Are they regular ed students?
It's possible for a student to be a member of multiple
categories,
student groups.
And it's
And
the EL
so-
group, not the Hispanic group.
Excuse me, I'm not talking to you.
Yeah, but
I'm
she
just
was
making a
clarifying. It's fine.
But I didn't know. Okay, I know what I'm asking. The DL students, right?
Yes.
Are they the black and brown students? Are they the black students?
It can be, if you have an IEP, you can be black, Hispanic,
Yes.
Asian,
Right.
And they're not going to separate that. They classify it as, if you are DL, we'll look at you as a whole group, no matter if you are a part of another group as well. They'll just look at that as a whole. Now, as an individual school, you'll want to know who those kids are.
Right.
And yes, you'll see that they're part of other groups too. But
Right.
as far as the report card goes in that category, it's anyone that has an IEP would be in that category.
Can I-
In DL.
Yes, diverse learner.
Maybe I can help with that. I think I can. So I visited Hyde Park this week, and Brian and I were having a conversation in regards to how his black males were performing in his school, et cetera, right? And Mr. Carr said, well, black is not one of my student groups, but DL is. So I said, when we're looking at data, we have to be very intentional on how we're looking at that data, right? So out of your DL population, which I believe we said was about over 20%, was it, when we looked at that, when we looked at African American males, right? Because I've been visiting a couple schools. I said, of that 20%, how many of those DLs are African American males? Because you may not think that the subgroup is black. However, majority of those students that fall in that DL category can be African American males or females, right? So we need to take a deeper look. So what you're seeing here is the overall picture of how our schools, what they look like, what are the student groups or the categories that are constituting needing more support. However, when we work with individual schools to set a strategy, those are the questions that we're asking, and that's how the data we're looking. So every school in here, it has a different strategy, has a different way of how they're looking at their student groups to put support. But what is important is to ensure that when we're looking at those student groups, that we're actually tying names and people to those data points, right? So if I have 25 males, of those 25 males, and we'll say 10 are in third grade, of those 10, how many are DL? How many are low income? Because those are the student groups. And you could have, I'm just going to use you, board president, just Brandon Ewing, who falls in 3 of those categories, right? So how are you supporting Brandon, not only in his DL category, but your low income category, so that you can ensure that your strategy is supporting across categories to improve instruction? And those are the conversations that I know I'm having with principals personally, but the area superintendent, it's how we look at data to add those supports or to ensure that the strategy we have is working, because the strategy may not be working, and be like, listen, this is not working. What else? Where do I need to add supports, or where do I need to change the momentum? And I thought that just goes into, yes, Ms. Hannah, a student can fall into multiple categories.
So, sorry, just can I add into this? I think the concern, and Ms. Hannah, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that when we're looking at this data, we want to know, okay, this school is targeted for DL and black students. This is the crossover. This is the Venn diagram of it. A majority of our DL students are also black, right? So it's that sort of comprehensive picture that I think we're looking for.
And I think from a district perspective, right, typically when we do our MOU, BOY, MOY, whatever, beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of year data dives, right, we parse them out. We haven't been asked before to do a Venn diagram, but you do report on each of the individual student groups. Is that correct, Dr.
Yes.
Brown? So
Yes.
on this one, we're trying to just review to the community and to the board in a transparent way. This is what the school report card. So I 100% agree with you. I'm always more concerned with the how, right? Even during this presentation, I'm getting questions and emails, and I see him, Ms. Briscoe, with individuals, the data's horrible. Again, the data is the data, right? And I'm not as concerned, and the data is what the data has been. I'm not as concerned with what the data is as much as what we are doing about it, which is also the why, right? You can't solve the problem if you don't know what it is. And I'm more inclined to deal with the strategies. I did have maybe a statement and a question, and then I'm going to Ms. Briscoe because I'm going to Ms. Gonzalez first. I'm sorry.
One thing, and this is, this is not something to answer today, but one thing that I think the board has inquired about in the past, and what I'm hearing as a recommendation based off of our data, is that professional development is making some wins in some of our schools, but do we have a snapshot of where we are with the district in terms of training, if we're going with Orton Gillingham, or if we're doing the math academy, I forget what it was called, at some of the schools. Are we able to find a way to not create a correlation between those programs, but to see where we fall with some of the schools that are adopting those professional training?
See how they're helping us.
Yeah, I think that's, sitting on the board and thinking about where we put our funding toward and what we see in the SIP plans, it would be nice to say, hey, as of, this past year, having trained X amount of teachers in the building, we have seen at least, 1% of our students push beyond, their metric in the previous year, and then, have a growth plan for that. I think that's maybe what I would feel more comfortable talking about when it comes to the data, because I think we're still putting the onus on the student, and the student already is dealing with enough and they're not performing, right? So what are those systemic things that we can measure and that we can continue investing in, so that we can share what we're doing with the community? Because I know that we're doing it, but I wonder if we could create some kind of, maybe a visual, maybe a chart to see how we're progressing within our buildings in relation to our PD and its effectiveness.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask a follow-up question, if I could, just to get clarity.
Yes.
So really, it's speaking to the effectiveness of the PD and its impact on student performance.
Mhm.
What is the correlation? This
Yes.
school's been doing Orton Gillingham for 3 years.
Right.
So what are we seeing in terms of student output?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can have a discussion about that. I don't know if you can, because you're talking about different
I know,
groups
everyone has
year to
different
year, right?
strategies.
But I think we can talk about the efficacy of the training for sure.
Because I see it in the classroom, and I can say they're using the strategies that they're learning at the conference. But if there's a way that we can kind of scale that and say, this is the takeaway for the teachers, and this is how we're actually helping students in the classroom.
I think there's two ways you can do it: looking at the teacher in practice, and then
Yes.
also looking at the student outcomes too.
Yes.
Yeah, to a certain extent. Yeah,
Yes.
sure. Thanks for the clarification.
So these are my comments, very, very briefly. I can see, and again, not to point fingers, but to kind of say, and I know you guys are working on it, but high school, the chronic absenteeism rate, those 18 days, that threw off the district average, where if that was just a few percentage points lower, because it's such a large group, we would see an increase. So maybe a future presentation around what we are doing as a district in order to combat chronic absenteeism, because the other thing that we know through previous deep dives is they show up. So they're at school, they just may not be in class and are missing a significant number of classes. So we'd love to hear an update on the strategy as to how we're dealing with absenteeism, specifically at the high school, and we may be interested to touch on some of the middle school data as well. Again, we talk about where it's starting. If 40% of the kindergartners are showing that they need additional assistance at the beginning, right, then to me, that is where we should be putting a significant investment of our resources. Is because if we do not start where they are showing up, and we are 40% behind where the test is that they should be. Is that an accurate statement, Dr. Brown?
I just want to add the piece that you saw with that of the students needing support for kindergarten. It is with those early skills, letter naming, all those, that the curriculum is going to take them through. So when we say it's a screener at the very beginning of the year, especially for kindergartners, it is to know where they are. And I look at it as give the teachers a chance to start with the curriculum, to go through that curriculum, and then let's look at MOI to see how that's changed. I would not necessarily jump up and look at those kids for those skills that are there. Those are very beginning skills that are expected to be taught. Unless the student has done preschool or had
Right.
schooling, you know, they
And that's
may
what I
not
mean,
come
is if-
in with those
if-
not being in the red for knowing the letters and
And
such.
I hate to interrupt, but that's my concern, right? Is because to Ms. Fabian's point is if it's relative. If our students are coming in at 40% and then being evaluated relative to other students that have had those supports, we're always going to show as lagging the overall group. And so what I'm saying is the as fast as we can close that gap with those basic skills, because I know you've also taught me that it's a moving target. So it becomes more difficult. So if I'm spending more time on those basic skills, when I take that MOY assessment, if it now requires me to be more advanced, but my teacher had to go back and do those basic skills, then I'm not going to be where I need to be at MOY, which means I'm not going to be where I need to be at end of year as well. So that was really important for me to see. And one thing that I want to call out to community, not to put the onus on our students, but to say this is a reality. So we're piloting full day pre-K at Carmen Buckner. So again, how do we expand that? Are we at 100% capacity, right? How do we continue to get our students that exposure so that they aren't starting off in kindergarten already not having the same exposure and opportunities that students in other communities get? So it's not a fault of their own. So that was one that I saw.
Can I touch on that really quick?
Sure.
I think another piece, right, is, you know, and I'm not bashing anybody, I was in this seat. Teachers don't know how to teach reading. So if our teachers who go to college to learn how to be teachers, we don't get that education, how are we going to expect parents at home to have those skills to help support teaching reading and the underlying skills? So as we look at our kindergartners, we also need to strengthen the relationship with the parents, and maybe it's through the schools connecting with the parents or the FACE department having special events on supporting parents how to help with literacy at home so that we can close that gap faster.
Yeah. And my last statement before I go to Ms. Briscoe is the PD doesn't work if we lose teachers or continue to have vacancies, right? It's because if you spend the money, we make the investment, we as taxpayers in District 60 as an employer upskill them to lose those resources to other districts. We really do want to get our heads around that. It's because I know teachers have made an investment, and again, if I have a vacancy, those students are struggling. If I have a substitute, we know that those students, it's a both end. We have 100 vacancies. I say that publicly. I say it every time. It's because I don't want people to be misled. And each of those vacancies represents roughly, if we say 20 students, right? And so that is the impact. And if we lose them, or we're continually replacing them, or they're here 3 years. So yeah, our attrition rate is still at 80%.
Right.
But if I'm only seeing a 3 or 4 year turnover, again, I know what that does for you all, right? I'm looking at my principals. And so we really want to get our hands around that. And I'll stop there. I'll go to Ms. Briscoe because I know she's been waiting if we can get her a microphone. And then I saw Ms. Vukovic's hand, and then I'll come back to Ms. Hannah.
Oh, and then I wasn't finished as well, but
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll just go after Miss Hannah. Maybe people will check it off my list.
So thank you so much for the presentation. I've been looking through the data at home. What is interesting for me, and which is what I continue to ask for, is when you talk about next steps, right? And so you say what the district is doing. It's hard for me to understand what you're currently doing and what you plan to do. Because if you look at the data overall, yeah, it's going up in some places, but not significant, right? And so if you continue to do the same thing, you're going to get the same results. However, if you put on the slide to say this is what we've been doing, however, this is what we are going to do in the future, then as a community member, I can understand, you get it. You understand that it's a problem, but this now is what you're going to put in place going forward. So that I would like to see. The other thing is that I continue to see that McCall is always on the blue ribbon. To me, if you have a school that's on the blue ribbon, why is that information? Maybe it is, I don't know. Why is it not being shared with the other schools so that we can bring the other schools up? I don't get it. So I would like for the district to do that so that we could see what's happening in McCall and the other schools that are at the top ranking. I mean, it doesn't make any sense for these schools to maintain that for years, and then we have some schools that are dropping, right? I think this is my last point. Oh, so for the metrics, right, the performance indicators, well, I call them performance indicators, but the graph that you have put up with the commendable and everything, right, I looked through those, and if you look at our district, even where we stand with our ranking for, hold on, commendable, we're still at the lower end. So if you look at the range, right, which is what I've been looking at, we're not at the higher end of commendable. We're at the lower end of commendable. And that's something that we need to be aware of, because we want to move that indicator also, right, to the other place. And I'm a deep dive person, so I look for those things. So we need to focus on that. What can we do also to bring our commendables up? Last question is, there was a rating of intensive support. Says it's new. Can someone tell me what is that? And I'm assuming we have no schools that fall into that category.
Correct.
Intensive support, if you go, well, slide, I think it's 9 or 10. I'm one off on you guys, so 9 or 10, it gives you a definition of what that means. A school that's in intensive support, there it is. Thank you. Schools that have been in school improvement status since 2018 and remain in the lowest 5% of state performance. So these are schools that over several years have been in the bottom 5% consistently year after year after year after year. This new status is, in my opinion, because of the state, it's new. It's one step before the state kind of comes in and really takes a closer look at what's happening in that school.
Okay, but don't we have 5 schools, if I remember, the board meeting that the state is coming in to help
They're
us
working
with
with
5
them.
schools?
Yeah, they're our comprehensive schools. They're working with them to do that needs assessment that Mr. Silver was talking about. It's that vendor that we at last
We had
week's
no
meeting.
choice. We had to bring them
We
on
had
and pay
that
all
vendor
that
that's
money.
coming in. The state's going to help do that needs assessment process with them, and they meet with the representative from the state. You guys meet monthly? Every month, and they talk through their SIP goals, progress that's being made, that kind of thing. And I think I shared this earlier. The state's getting much more intentional with the supports that they're providing to districts, which is a good thing, because usually in the past, historically has been, here's your ratings, here's the reasons why, and kind of leaving us to figure it out, which is fair, right? We can do that, but now they're really getting more involved with the principals, with that school improvement planning, the progress monitoring as well. The ESSA grant that we get as a result of these designations, the flexibility in how those dollars are used has been really shrunken. So they're really looking at how schools are using those funds now to support student groups, et cetera. So it's been much more, much more intensive support.
All right, they're coming to get the microphone from Ms. Vukovic.
Just to bounce off of what Mr. Gonzalez was saying about the fact that we can't put all of the onus on the students because they're children and they only can get what they are given.
Right.
When I look at the next steps, and I don't see very much, and it's something I've been talking about for 6 years, about adding more supports, and Mr. Ewing touched on it with, let's start with at the beginning. Okay, now we can't control what happens at home before they get here, except for offering free preschool, full-time, pre-K or full day. That is where, but the school really can't, and themselves, other than educating the parents about their children. I know when I was a reading specialist, if parents brought, when they came for conferences, if they came with preschoolers, which they often would bring their younger children, we would give them things to do with the preschool, their kids at home. At least if their child was seeing me, let's say for reading, I would make an assumption, I shouldn't have, but that maybe the child was behind and the one that I had because there wasn't a lot happening at home. So we talked, a long time about reading every night and all of that. So when I looked at the next steps, I don't see the money being spent on extra support, physical bodies, and I know there's 100 openings, and they're, of course, across the board, all different levels. But the students, some of them need intensive small group work.
Yes.
And the classroom teachers are up to here with what they have to do right now. And then when the reading specialists were cut and I was back in the classroom, it was my job, because for a year we didn't have any reading specialists. It was my job to pull out the kids that were having a great deal of difficulty on top of my tier 1 kids that I was supposed to see in groups. It's impossible. And now after COVID, of course I was there before COVID, after COVID when obviously the not deep dive, but the big drop in scores and the students' achievement, now we need to spend the money, and that's why I'm so upset that the ESSER money, the COVID money, is over next fall to September 2024, and we didn't use that money for the last 4 years to hire specialists that could help these children in kindergarten, first, second, and third, because everybody knows if they don't know how to read by 3rd grade, they're going to be struggling. And I mean, it's over. I mean, this year is already half done, and I'm hoping that whatever, if we have extra money because of our designations, if we're given more, I can't imagine with all you said that they've now like closed the parameters on what you can spend the money on. I highly doubt that they're going to say you can't hire personnel to help children learn to read. I don't know, maybe I haven't seen what the rules are, but professional development is only as good as giving it to the teachers that are going to stay. And again, if they're coming in 1, 2, 3 years, I mean, some of the schools, I went farther down when I did the deep dive with this report card and looked down at, what was how many novice teachers at the school, what was the retention rate of the staff, all of that. And there's a whole lot of lines that match when there's a school that has, practically replaced their entire staff, or students, the staff is moving or they leave a school to go to another school in the district. That should be more alarming to us than just teachers leaving because they want to go to a district that pays more. It's when they leave a school and go to another school in the district. Those should be red flags right away, and find out why. And I hope that somebody, I don't know if it's the area superintendents, are doing that deeper dive and looking down at those drop things on the side about teacher evaluations, what they're getting. And I'm not at all blaming the principals, because you guys are over your head in everything too, I'm sure. There's so many pieces to it. And I know you have to, where do we start? Start with getting people in the buildings to sit with the children. That's number one. And we've sat here now for 5 or 6 years with 1 or 2 people in the building that are actually taking kids out of the classroom and working with them in 4 or 5 in a group. And here we are. And that's, as you said, Ms. Lensing, it's not pretty. And how do you fix it? And I think all of these next steps include, professional development, and we're going to have the area superintendent come and meet with the principal and go with the ILT for this. How much is that? I understand that's a good thing to look at data, but the children are gone by 4 o'clock when the ILT is meeting. And all that extra support there, I don't know how much of that's transferring back into the classroom. So
Ms. Vukovic, you have some really good points, and I know you have been an advocate for reading specialists and pulling out and pushing in. But because I have my principals here tonight, they all have a school-based budget, and if I'm misspeaking, please raise your hand, guys. And so every individual every principal in this room here in our boardroom is the instructional leader for their building. And we believe that the principal is a lever of change, right? And so every principal has a strategy and they have a school-based budget. And so if they want a reading specialist, we call it an IST, then they would put that in their budget and they would budget that for next year. And so that's when we go through the budgeting process. I know I was at North today. I know that Nicole has one. And so the strategy is but if she wanted to, she'd have to write that in. So the reason I'm telling you that is that we've never denied that. And a principal out there may not be my solution. But school-based budgeting, they can ask for what they need, whether they're pushing in, whether they're pulling out, whatever their strategy is. But the strategy does differ. I mean, just like we talked about Carol May, she's been at her building since I've been here, has a pretty tenured staff, am I correct? And so they have a way of how they do the work because they've been together. And you're absolutely right. When there's transition in buildings, and however, people do have the right to work where they want, and we want that right. I'm going to use Ms. Kiona's Nelson. She was very close to going to exemplary, and she had some transition in her building and has a fairly new staff and is rebuilding that, right, to get back to where she was at previously. And so we do see those pieces, but as we stated, you know, it takes a lot to make the gumbo, and it definitely takes a strategy. But I can look at every principal out there, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I know my leaders out there, and I know their building's pretty good in their data. I don't think one strategy would fit all, because each one have a different way of how they do the work. They have different staff that are in different places in the work. They need different development. Some have higher DL sections versus EL sections, different philosophies on how they do it. But what they do have is they do have some autonomy when they're creating their school-based budgets on what they need in their building. I mean, we have climate and cultures now in elementary school, so they do have that flexibility to put that in their budgets. And I just want to acknowledge that because I know you've been a big advocate, and it is important, and it is very helpful. And the schools do have autonomy to write that in their budgets if they feel that that's the strategy that they're going to utilize within their buildings.
Ms. Anna.
Okay. Thank you all for the presentation. I am wondering, in all of these data points, right, and the relevancy of the substitutes that are in our district, are they getting some type of training in what the classroom teachers are teaching instead of being just a substitute, okay? Because that's relevant, okay, in student progress. If there's no consistency in the classrooms, then it's going to impact the students' education. And you all know that I have been talking about training for the substitutes. We know that we have to have them, and so we should not employ them simply as babysitters. And so I'm not looking for babysitters. We need the people that are before our children. If Miss Lindsay was out for 2 days and she has been on a consistent course with her students, then she's out 2 days and a substitute comes in and they're not trained to even kind of pick up where Miss Lindsay was. The students are going to be impacted. So what's the plan?
Sure. So for the long-term subs, because the example you gave was day-to-day subs, for the long-term subs, we did have training at the beginning of the school year talking about logistics, also exposing them to some of the curricular materials that we're using. And the other piece for the day-to-day, I believe that right now what we've talked about was putting together a, I don't want to say a manual, but a brochure that would give them high-level information that would help them. It's very difficult to step in for, to come in and teach 5th grade one day and 3rd grade the next, but having an idea of what are the materials that are available. If we could give them that information, that's what we're looking to do for the following year.
Right, because, and you could, you could distinguish it. This is for elementary. This is for middle. This is for high school. And, get something.
Just an overview,
that's
most
going
definitely
to help them.
Yes.
To at least get through.
Yep. You're absolutely
the
right.
Same classwork that the regular teacher was doing.
I don't, just to be very clear, I don't know if we can give them to that level, right? But we can at least give them an overview of what materials are used at the grade level and some general information about the grade bands. Those are some things. There are a lot of districts that are doing the same thing. We have some samples. The team has looked at them, talked about our next steps with them. To go really deep, that would probably be an additional step. But right now, just to give an overview for somebody who's stepping in day to day, having an overview, I think would also be very helpful.
And Dr. Cesario, I just want to say this publicly because I know some of the principals, but there's been talk about long-term subs staying after the school day or before the school day. And so if they are staying after the school day or before the school day, they should get paid for the hours that are not their hours. I do know I've had that conversation with Mr. Figueroa. I do know that Ms. Patty has been working on that. So I know that I just heard a little bit of noise out there, but please know I've handled that and I've given that directive already where that is, so we'll circle back with you.
Yeah, that's something that LeBaron and Ms. Patty were discussing.
I see you, but I'm going to Ms. Lindsay, and then I got you, Mrs. Sabecki.
Oh. I have a couple of questions, so if we want to let Mr. Sabecki go, and if it crosses off one of mine, he at least gets to voice it.
All right, so there's a couple of points I want to touch on here. And I'm going to use our middle school since most of the principals are here. Piggybacking off what Ms. Briscoe said, this is what we've been doing, so what's the plans of what we're going to do? Because the scores haven't been changing. So obviously what we're doing is not working. So looking at our middle schools, ELA, we've been using the same curriculum for over a decade. It is not changing. So when are we going to take the deep dive in that curriculum and change the curriculum? Because obviously it's not working. It's been the same over a decade. And we keep seeing the same exact results. So we need to look at that and change it. Or else we're going to keep getting the same results year after year, and we're going to have the same conversation every single year. Moving up a point or two, that's nothing to brag about. Nothing at all. And on the other thing we want to talk about, we talk about teacher shortages. Correct. When it's the students, and I'm going to use my own student as an example. When they have long-term subs, and then teachers are moved, we're about to lose another long-term sub in one of my son's classes. They're reaching, they're about to be done. And then we had another one of my son's same student. Teacher moved to a different middle school. And that he was getting an A in that class, and I spoke about this at the last board meeting. He was getting an A. A grade hasn't been entered in over a month. Now all of a sudden, I go on Infinite Campus and I check it 100 times a day. Now that kid's getting a C. How? In a week, from an A to a C. And if that is the true grades, then it should be alarming to our principals and teachers. Obviously, there's a problem. If a kid's performing at this level, and within a week is dropped to this level, there's something going on. And it doesn't help when we're switching teachers, and that's one of the things. So now it could be a totally different teacher, and there are different teaching styles, different teachers every single day, a different substitute. We're not going to see any change when our kids are getting that. And we can go over to the high school with my other son. When he's constantly going into classrooms and there's no teachers in there, it's supposed to be covered, but there's no teachers in there. We're talking about high school. Nobody in this room can tell me, and a high school student's going to go tell, hey, we ain't got no teacher in here. They're going to sit in there, play on their phones, and do whatever they do. And I'm tired of the excuses, because this happens year after year after year. Tell me there was a teacher in there, then there wasn't a teacher in there, then there was a teacher in there. Or it was supposed to be covered, and we have an excuse of why it's not covered. The kids are not getting the education if there's not a teacher in the room. And we as a district, we create our own problems of teacher shortages ourselves. And I talk about this every week at that mic too. We are top heavy on administrators in this district, and we create the own problem because now we create another administrative position, and then teachers apply, and we pull the teachers out of the classrooms to fill that position. Now we just created another vacancy that's not filled. This is the stuff that needs to be looked into. We're top heavy on administrators. I remember when you came in there, we said we were too top heavy, we cut them. We need to start looking at that and start putting the administrators back in the classrooms, if that's what we have to do to cover it so the kids get the education they need. If that's what we got to do, then that's what we got to do. Because it's not fair to the students to have a different teacher every single day because they ain't going to get no academic. Their scores are not going to change. That needs to be looked at, taking the deep dive in it, and we need to figure it out.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Lindsay.
To touch on something that Mr. Sebecki brought up when you were speaking of students when there's a change in instructor, go from an A to C grade. When I was at CUBE, one of the presentations I attended, or was it a speaker? I think it was a speaker or presentation, my mind, was Dr. Rosa Rivera McCutcheon, and she talked about limiting care. And so what limiting care is when teachers wanting to support the student because they have X number of factors impacting their ability to academically succeed will accept mediocrity in the service of that student. Like, I know you've got a lot going at home and this is your best work, so I'm going to give it an A on this assignment, whereas if I was being objective, then it might get a C. I wonder how much of that is happening in Waukegan, in our school systems, with our teachers, not out of intent to do harm, but as a result of it. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because when we were campaigning, we heard from lots of parents where it's like, my kid was a straight A student, I was worried about X factors, I moved them to a different school district, and all of a sudden they're a C student. So there's different levels of expectations from different populations. So that's something that I would be curious on to see if, are we looking at a consistency issue? Are we looking at a limiting care issue? Let's do that deep dive. So I just wanted to touch on that really quick. And to touch on the budgeting process, can we help me understand, because it's my understanding that a school will list out all of their needs, and it's not that they get all of those needs, that then goes to the area superintendents or a different team that goes through and says, okay, we have to parse this down, we can't do all of this.
And we had 80 million. I'm done.
Right? Because when we went through the school site-based budgeting process, I was concerned that some schools were requesting 300,000 and others were getting upwards of 600,000 or 700,000.
Yeah.
So that's an inequity piece. So while we're talking about it, I just want to make sure we have a fair way to get the schools what they need when they ask for it, and we're not really parsing that down too much.
Because the schools would know
What
what
they
they need.
Yeah.
And if what they're asking for, they're not giving it, okay, then, you know, that's not fair to the schools.
Yeah, so I'm not, I have whispers of what's happening, but I don't have the clearest picture, so that would be helpful. We brought up McCall. I do want to acknowledge that when I was attending the literacy town halls, McCall has been piloting a different program for the phonics, and we're seeing great results from it. So I just want to commend the principal and your staff. You guys are doing a great job I love the results that we're seeing, and I'm just hoping that we can get that to spread across the district.
Absolutely.
Back to my questions on the presentation. So within the presentation, we're talking about chronic absenteeism, right? And that's 18 days. And we're telling or encouraging kids to come every day. We have given them 5 days of mental health, which counts against them in these results. And then if a student is sick, we don't want them in the classroom. I don't want them in the classroom, because then you are getting other students sick, and then they're not able to come. And then you're getting the teacher sick, and then the teacher's not able to come. This year, strep is up 6 times more than it was last year. I know because I have a mask, because that's what happened to me. I got strep, right? I'm on antibiotics. I'm not contagious. This is just precaution just for everybody's safety, right? But when we're talking about chronic absenteeism, we don't want our students to risk their health for that. So I just want to be very careful as we engage in that type of language around that component of these grades. And then just for the community's clarification, with the high school graduation rate, that's going to be tied to the credits that they have. When does that 17 credit go into place for us to start looking at the data with regard to that update? Just so we're all on the same page.
Yeah. This year.
This year. This is the first year, right? So we're not going to get that information until a couple months after the school year, so like next October, like Ms. Fabiana said.
This will be the first year, just because I wasn't in the microphone.
No, that's totally fine. Thank you. Just so we're all on the same pot. And then with regards to the supports that we're putting in place, what are we doing with summer intensive learning, right? So I can understand that maybe teachers can't do an intensive piece during the school year because they have a classroom of 20 to 30 kids. But what are the plans to address those in the red with an intensive program? We're getting teachers trained in Orton Gillingham, 95%, a couple of other programs. So what intensive pieces do we have? Because the impression I get, and it may be the wrong one, I hope it's the wrong one, the impression that I'm getting from those who go to summer school, it's not as beneficial as it could be.
Yeah, so that's a great point. So the planning is going to start in January, but one of the things that we're going to focus on is exactly what you just said. Utilizing what we're training the teachers on, using that professional development, using those resources that we're currently using, really our tier one, what we're implementing there, using that to support our students and being much more intentional with that. Because in the past it hasn't been, I would say, it's not been as focused on academics. Academics has been a part of it, and I believe that we've scaled it up over the last 4 or 5 years. However, we do, because of some of the expectations that are going to be in the promotion policy, preparing for that, and also just in alignment with the work that we're doing, we need to make sure that we're addressing that in the summertime.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I love to hear that. I'm curious as to know when the board and the community will be updated on those plans, because you're going to get started in January, so I'm not expecting you to roll out that information in January.
Probably, we usually roll something out around March to kind of just the first 2 weeks of March, something like that, to kind of just share what we have thus far.
Yeah,
So-
I'm very excited for it.
Sure.
Because we now have the tools to arm our teachers with to be able to deliver that type of intervention. So that's really good to hear. And then I had a quick question, just because there was a comment. Can we clarify for the community how a student gets an EL designation?
Sure. Do you want to speak to it, or here we can get the mic. Are you sure?
And then while you're answering that question, we understand that as students get older, that growth in that area you've stated is expected to be less. So I'm just curious, is our current growth where we expect it, or what is the goal for the expectation for the middle school and high school groups?
So the question, I'm sorry, so that Good evening, board, community.
Evening.
Sorry. So
You're
your
fine.
question was, how does a student get an EL designation?
Just so we're all on the same page.
So when a parent comes to Welcome Center to register, they have to fill out by law a home language survey. It has 2 questions on it. Is there another language spoken in the home, or does the student speak another language? If they say yes to either one, it prompts testing. The testing is automatic. It's a WIDA screener developed by WIDA, and it's a cut score set by the state. If they don't pass, it's an English screen, it's in English. If they don't pass that test, then they automatically qualify as an English learner.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
So they're just given the screening in English?
Yes.
But if they don't speak English,
Then they'd be
how are
designated as
you-
an English learner.
Right, but maybe if the test was in Spanish, maybe they'd pass it.
But not.
So I know. I'm just saying.
No, that makes sense.
We
It's
teach
not a
them
bad thing that they
Spanish.
failed that test
We-
because they go into the classrooms that they need to go into to get curriculum instruction.
Thank
also
you,
give-
Miss Ambrosio.
Sure. We also give them the test in Spanish if we know that they speak Spanish to see
Right.
what level they're at in Spanish as well.
How
But
big
by
the
law, it has to be in English.
Right, I know.
Yes, and then if they cannot pass the English screener, then they automatically qualify for the program.
Because the test is assessing English proficiency,
Yes.
right? So
Right.
you could
For
support
language
the child.
dominance,
That's
yes.
the rationale.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, and so I have.
So in
one-
other words, they would not be able to compete with their general education monolingual peers in a regular general education monolingual classroom. Yes, so
And
they need special
we,
services.
we are, that's another question on another student achievement, but just off the top of your head, are we moving bilingual students out? Are we cycling them in and out of bilingual?
So we have a dual language program and our overall, and so our dual language program, we want to promote biliteracy, so they stay in the program once they exit needing EL service. So they no longer are EL, but they stay in the program and continue to learn high levels of academic English and Spanish, all the way to 12th grade, so they can achieve that seal of biliteracy.
And I told you that we need that for all of our students.
That's right, we're working on it.
Yeah. Okay, can I just say my last comment?
I get Ms. Linsing had a second
I just
part to
got
that
3
question.
more.
Oh,
And they'll be
okay.
super fast, I hope.
Okay.
So sorry, just to touch back on that. So our middle school and high school, even though they're expected to grow less, are they on target of what we hope their growth would be? Or is that still under?
In my opinion, I think it's under.
Okay.
We still need to work on that. So
Okay.
there's a lot of ESL that we have to do in the middle school especially.
Yeah.
For our students. They need a lot of support in their English language development. And as the test goes up in grade level, it becomes more and more rigorous.
Yeah.
The English academic level that they're expected to know to read, write, speak, and listen to becomes much more complicated. And if we're not teaching them to those levels and we're ignoring the need that they have at that English language proficiency level and just teaching them a monolingual curriculum, we are doing a tremendous disservice to our ELs.
I love the energy and passion and advocacy. Thank you.
Sure.
Can we jump to slide 43 with the Spanish reading? So in second grade, they're at 12% in the low, and then at third grade, it's 37%. That's a drastic jump, so can we just highlight for the community, right, the skills that are expected from second grade Spanish reading to third grade Spanish reading? Because going from a 12 to a 35 in 1 year transition, that might be alarming, so if we can just give context around that.
Okay, so for second grade, no, that's not right. What I was thinking.
So a lower number.
What I'm trying to do is look at the counts specifically for that.
67.
It's half the numbers, well, less than.
I mean the total counts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, those are okay. Those are okay. The second grade test, it's lumped in with the second through fifth grade test. So it's not, I was going to say that second grade test is audio based like the K1, but it's not. It's not audio based.
We could come
And if
back
it's a
with that answer.
takeaway,
I
that's
don't know how to
totally
give you
fine.
the-
That's
yeah.
totally fine.
Would it be because, and I'm going to look at Ms. Rodriguez, but I also think there's a difference
then
there
that
where
should
kids
be
are
easier
learning
to
how to read and then reading,
There's a transition.
right,
of
right,
that.
that's the transition year. I always, learning to read versus reading to learn.
But I can get you some information about that.
Awesome.
Okay.
And then, sorry, just some feedback. There is some kind of academic jargon in here that's not really accessible. So when we talk about deep teacher inquiry and collegial discourse,
Right.
it's not accessible to people if we're looking at the national population reading at a 6th grade level. I'm just going to throw that out there. And then my last piece, and then I'll be quiet for a while. On 53, where we have the purple, green, and gold next steps, the building-based team of experts. So you're delivering all of this development training to our principals and our assistant principals. I'm not making any implications, but my question is, what is the follow-up to how they've disseminated that information? What's the assessment of that success to make sure that that's going to the teachers and how well that's being communicated?
It just, I mean, if you look at that purple box, it talks about.
Can we put the slide up for our communities? So
54, 5, 3?
3.
It talks about the instructional coaches and the ISTs as well.
Yep.
So that information flows downhill to classrooms through those folks. Is that what your question is?
How are we checking in on how well that downflow has happened, right? Because now you're not getting information firsthand, you're getting it second, third.
Okay.
it's train the trainer model and talk about the walkthroughs.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is that there is there's progress monitoring through with the area superintendents and with the principals. So they have a tool that they have look fors, and then they essentially tally that information and they look for the percentage of which they're going to see the frequency of whatever it might be. You want to give an example of that for real quick?
Or how well it's going.
Yeah. Good evening, board and community. One of the things, like the middle school has been specifically working with the PLCs, and then we've been working with the ILT and the MTSS team to train that and break it down to the grade level teams. And so as we're going through our 3-week walk-in, check-in, is something I developed utilizing the state coordinator, Miss Kathy. And so we actually progress monitor certain specific indicators that the state is looking for, and then they get a red, yellow, and green on each visit so we can see how the progress is going, as well as I'm walking in the classroom with the principal on each visit, and then we're giving the teachers feedback as well of what we see in the indicators.
Okay, and then we're using that on a district level to either provide additional supports or redirect as we see that it's either working or not working, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Anna, then Ms. Fabian.
Okay, you know, and those of you that know me, you know, growth is okay, but we need to be reaching for attainment. You know, growth. 1% growth, 2% growth. To me, that's not acceptable. Okay, we need to be, our children need to attain reading skills. Our students need to attain skills in math. And I've never been an advocate for the growth model, because over the years I know kids can grow 1-2 percentage points and they still are not at grade level. And so that's what I'm looking for. Grade level competency.
Yep.
That's what I'm looking for. And hopefully soon we're going to see some attainment instead of growth. That gentleman had a
I see it, but Ms. Fabian's had her hand up. Go ahead, Ms. Fabian.
Yeah, so growth is set by ISB because of the inequities. And so knowing and understanding that students don't all start at the same starting point, they're not all going to get to that finish line at the same time, which is why we not only look at attainment, but we also look at growth. But what I was going to, one, clarify is, I know we've been having the curriculum mapping, so from my understanding, that middle school curriculum should not be more than a decade old, nor should any curriculum that we're using. That should all have been updated. Two, we have not seen a recent update of that curriculum mapping, and so maybe, as Ms. Briscoe was saying, like looking at next steps, and there's not a clear-cut progression of what we're going to do, is that when we get that update of where that curriculum mapping is that somehow we tie it back to the report card where you say we've done this deep dive, EL at third grade is struggling in this area, and therefore we've updated the curriculum to support that need, or fifth grade, DL students, we're seeing that struggle, so we've updated the curriculum to support that need. So if we can kind of tie those things together so that we're understanding that as the curriculum is being written, we are looking at the data to support our students with all of those resources. And also, with our long-term subs, do they have access, because I know it's an online platform, do our long-term subs have access to even be able to access that curriculum map, so that if the teacher is all of a sudden out and there are no lesson plans, but the kids can say, we're on unit whatever, because I know when I was in the classroom, my kids would tell you what the heck they were working on and where they were, what book, that that sub could access and say, okay, let me look at that unit at that grade level and see what main standards we should be working at. That would kind of help with that consistency piece where you don't have to explicitly train them on every unit or grade, but they could at least access and gather some information and some tools.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, are you looking for a response? I don't know. So,
I don't know if long-term
we
subs have
did,
that access or
so, I'm not, I don't think they have the access, do they? So I see a bunch of hands up. Yeah, go ahead.
Long-term subs have access. The idea, and now I'm going to go on to the other thing I can say about subs. It's very difficult for our day-to-day stuff to cover.
Yeah.
For the people online.
Are we good? Okay.
Yes.
Long-term subs do have access, and I'm just going to talk. Some of the long-term subs are excellent. They do the same work that teachers do, so oftentimes I'm fighting that they get the same respect and opportunities that our teachers do, because they're doing the same work.
Yep.
They just don't have the certification. Nonetheless, they're no lesser. Like, they're keeping us going.
Right.
So we really should take care of our long-term subs. And for a day-to-day sub to have to do every single grade, it's a blessing when they come and just cover our classes sometimes.
Yes.
So when it comes day-to-day, sometimes babysitting is okay.
It's hands on deck.
All right,
It's
because
hands on
we're
deck.
doing what we can with the sub-plans, and then you have the teachers just surrounding them that is supporting day-to-day. The PD for day-to-day, we can have some overall stuff, but it would be overwhelming. We would have to give them opportunities for pay outside of the workday in order to provide this PD. Currently, I have a long-term sub in my building. She's only long-term because she can't afford to not work and do her student teaching. She has a bachelor's degree. She's excellent in the classroom with the most troublesome kids, right? The trauma. They have more needs, high needs kids.
We got
They need more love.
What is it? It's the week before vacation. We got you. You said she's working with high needs kids, and she's very patient, but she just can't afford to student teach.
Yeah.
So we're accepting donations. I'm just kidding. But just so you know about the situation with subs, and there's a shortage. There's a shortage everywhere. Teachers are splitting kids. Sometimes that's challenging too because I'll take them and I'm gonna try to manage them and include them in my lessons. But sometimes that's difficult, and sometimes that's also where we have a problem with making sure we can do what we plan to do on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes we can't because we're covering for our colleagues when they have to be out sick, like with sickness and everything being so high. So that's what I want to share.
Thank
So
you.
can I
Thank
ask
you,
a
Miss
follow-up to
Lanu,
that?
because I needed to hear that. Thank you.
So, again, that would be probably another next step, is what are we doing to support those long-term subs? Because we do have short-term licensing going on.
Mhm.
We do have the grant. How do we remove those barriers? When I got the grant, it was the same thing. I had to do my student teaching. It was fabulous. I had my bachelor's paid for, but I was pregnant, and I had to give up working in a paycheck. I had to negotiate for myself with the district, for the district to pay my health insurance while I student taught. And I promised that I would work for 3 years, and I was a sucker because I stayed for 18. But, you know, how are we removing those barriers and coming up with those kinds of solutions so that our long-term subs can go get the certifications that they need? So,
Yeah.
again, tying that all back to the report card and the next steps, when those plans are presented, maybe having those connections put in.
I was just on the phone with National Louis today about alternative certification through the Hawkins grant, the grant that you all approved last spring. And so it's not only limited to paraprofessionals that want to get their licensure, but also focusing on alternative certification for those folks that have. So I did tell Clarence he'll follow up with you. I can contact this person tomorrow again that I spoke with, so that we can focus
And
on
those
that.
that haven't.
I don't know the ins and outs of it, but she did mention on the phone call that the alternative certification for folks that sound very similar to the situation you just described. So yeah,
And just-
we do value those long-term subs, and we really appreciate the work that they're doing. So I want to emphasize that point right now. Yeah, thank you.
And yes, and just to add to that, you know, because we had talked about it, and I brought it up maybe once or twice. The University Center does have new certification courses. They're right down the street. You know, certification in literacy, in letters, or, you know, things that our teachers may need. And you know, we've been saying it as a board for a while, is that, like, where's the pathway for our paras to become teachers, and can we increase that? Because that's also funding that we can put behind. I know it's, you know, it varies by our site-based budget, but it could be top of the house expense, and you know, it doesn't have to be drastic from one year to the next, but it's something that I think we just need a snapshot of where we're at and how many are interested, because I completely agree. We have teachers who are just they're in the classroom taking care of the kids. They're a person that is in front of them, and I don't want there to be this narrative that we don't have hands on deck or people who are willing to come in and support our kids, because we do. And there are people who are veterans who stay here in the district for a really long time. And you know, and this is the last thing I'll say. You know, because we pointed out the students, we pointed out the teachers, but I really think that every school needs a family engagement plan, a robust family engagement plan, because the only person that's going to be consistent in a student's life is not going to be that sub, it's not going to be that teacher, it might not even be the staff members in the school, it's going to be their guardian, and they have to have a stake in this game too, of where their student is at in their academic achievement journey. And so I think that, you know, that needs to be as embedded into this strategy as you know, we can make it, because I don't hear that right now too, and I don't want us as a board to lose sight of that as well, that we need to bring the parent and guardian into the conversation as well.
Yeah. So we got 2 more points. I'm gonna go to one community comment. I'm gonna wrap up, and then we will go to our next meeting.
Yeah, how you doing? I'm a day-to-day sub. I used to be a long-term sub, and you know, one thing I know is I don't just want to sit around and babysit kids. I want to try to teach them. I try to do a lesson plan. Even if I don't have a lesson plan, I try to emphasize as best as possible what they are learning and try to help them do a review and everything else and help them learn. And I have had experience with a lot of troublesome kids. The only thing I see is I need we need more information on how to deal with some of these troublesome kids, how to approach them. Because basically I've received training elsewhere through an outside agency when I got to start into substitute teaching, and I want to be a regular teacher. And some of these kids, I don't know what to do with them. Because, I try to keep aloof here because, you can't touch them or anything else like that. I had a group of kids here and 2 troublesome students. I mean, I just could not really focus on those 2 troublesome students. I had to focus on the other students here and try to keep them busy. And it's hard to do that here. And I need some to train like that CPAS training or something like that for day-to-day subs. We need something like that for day-to-day subs, how to handle these kids, how to properly teach them do's and don'ts. And a lot of subs don't have that. We had the issues here basically back in not Lewis but Benny here, and then I think there may have been something else too. I don't know where, but I don't want to get into situations like that, how to deal with these kids, because sometimes when they're getting into a fight, I got to stand between them here, and then they're going to start hating me or something like that.
Right.
And we need to get some better discipline, and also how to teach properly, because I have a degree in chemistry from minor in biology, and I want to teach math and science, particularly chemistry, at least in at least middle school level or elementary school level. And I like to see about getting some proper training where I can get at least my professional educator's license. And all I see is just these universities, but what is the basic requirement? What courses do I need to take? I need something like that.
Right. And let me just say this, in terms, please, I apologize. When I used the term babysitting, okay, it was just basically, for lack of a better term, I was a substitute teacher, day-to-day and long-term. So I do understand, and the only thing I'm advocating for is more training, like you were saying.
Yeah, right. Go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
So within sub-plans, is classroom management not a component? Like these 2 students don't get along, make sure they're separated throughout the day, or this student, if they're having a hard day, they're really interested in X, Y, and Z, so you can build a relationship by bringing up those pieces or these topics? Is that part of the sub-plans?
Well, some of them, they do have it there. Some of them are thorough on how the students are. The only thing is sometimes I don't know where the sub-plans are located. Usually I should be on the desk where the teacher's desk is, and sometimes I can't find them. Okay. And that's a thing here. And I need something where it can be easy to get at. Where am I going to be at? Because at times, I talk with other teachers and see what they're doing. Because some of them, I do pretty well at some of the schools, especially at Carl Buechner. And one I know teacher I'm going to see tomorrow because she wants me in on her class, I believe, Friday and everything else, so I can get to know the students and everything else and how to handle them and what needs to be done on the lesson plan here. Because the issue I know for as a day-to-day sub, you come in here, you get in 50 minutes early, try to get everything oriented, and okay, where's the sub plans at here?
Right.
Or where is it something easy to get? They have to have something where it's at. Or what I think they need to do is have something maybe more general. If the teachers can't do it, have something general on what it is, on what the plans are, what the lessons are, and continue on with that, which should be what basically continue on what the other teacher was doing. And that's why I think what substitute teacher should be even day to day teach it, because I've got a bachelor's degree here. I'm versed in, besides that's my major here, other ones here where I can actually teach well with English too. And I mean basically basic composition, subject, verb, nouns, pronouns here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
we talked about a lot of different things, and we had some conversations around some systemic issues, as well as coming up with some issues to some solutions to address them. I do want to thank Ms. Lanou. Is something that you talked about is, if we talk about equity and we speak about equity for the students, however, we continue to support a system that we know has been inequitable. I'm hoping that after our teacher union contract is finalized, we can shift our focus on looking at some of those other issues. I also want to thank all of our principals and wish you all a Merry Christmas. I appreciate you guys coming out this evening to this board meeting. We know your job is not easy, and we appreciate everything that you do. I don't know what's worse, a full moon or a week before vacation, right, when it comes to the students. So I thank you for everything that you guys are doing, and we appreciate you guys coming, sitting through the presentations, and thank you for the efforts with our students.
Have a safe break.
And you guys remember what the superintendent said. You guys got to write stuff in your SIP plans. Put it in there.
Again, if we, I know they looking, right? That budget is not unlimited, and I'm the one to tell y'all we did not raise taxes. So again, ask for what you need, but we appreciate you all.
Thank you, thank you.
With that, I'd like a
Holly.
motion to adjourn.
Merry Christmas.
Motion by Mr. Lensing, second by Mr. Riddle. All in favor, signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Meeting is adjourned. We're going to take 5 minutes, and then we're going right into our operations. to call to order the December 19, 2023 Operational Services Committee meeting. If I can have a roll call, please.
Ms. Hannah?
Yes.
Ms. Lansing?
Yes.
Ms. Fabian? Yes. Ms. Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mr. McBride? Mr. Riddle?
Yes.
President Ewing?
Yes. All right. We do have a quorum. The only board member not currently present is Mr. McBride. We have item 3A, approval of the meeting minutes for the November 21st, 2023 OSC meeting.
Motion to approve.
Motion by
Second.
Mr. Riddle, second by Ms. Gonzalez. Any comments, questions, corrections to the minutes? All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Minutes are approved. One passed. We have our information items, and just like the previous thing, I'm going to go through each one and give the opportunity to ask questions to the board and community members who are present. We got item 5A, attendance at NSBA Advocacy Institute 2024.
That's good.
Information has been listed there. Item 5B, approval of the new playground in North Elementary and Robbie Lightfoot pre-K program. The information has been listed there.
Excuse me, Board President. I do want to make a comment on that item briefly. And we do have the pre-K staff here represented, but I did want to make a note here that the total quoted cost of $138,000, actually the approval with our representative is $90,000. So we're going to be modifying this to support what's been approved, but I did want to make that clear to the board this evening when this comes back to you. The estimated quote for the flooring of the playground at Robbie Lightfoot as well as the new playground at North will not exceed $90,000, which is what we've been approved for in this current year.
Are we getting any kind of assistance or anything with our playgrounds? Somebody help me, what was the name of that group that came in to put the playgrounds in?
Well, the last round was parents.
Yeah, we did what we call community builds, and we had parents, and we've also had like United Way and other organizations
Right,
assist.
Zoom, Zam,
Does that sound familiar?
what is she's asking for?
I don't remember the name, but there was nothing free. So anyone that did come in and help finish a playground build outside of community and organizations that volunteered, we did have a cost. Am I correct?
Yeah, there was about a $5,000 per playground to finish them after the volunteers assisted.
Right.
Okay, I'll just have to look back at my papers, because there was an organization that that was putting playgrounds in.
I think the Bears actually donated
there
some,
were- I know
because
there
I
were
worked on
some
that one.
people.
Yeah, I know that, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
But
a few
we will
years,
be
few
paying
years
for
back,
these.
yeah.
Right? That's
Yes,
what,
sir.
Yep.
Yep. And sorry, I have one question on this item. When are we planning to install the playground?
That is a great question. So we're trying to get this done this year, but as you all know, the lead times for playgrounds is extensive. So
In this school year, not
Yeah.
physical.
do you want to speak?
So hopefully
Yeah,
like
we're
April
trying to
or
do
May.
it this fiscal year.
Okay.
So by June 30th.
Perfect. Okay.
Good.
We're not looking to ask community members to come out in the cold to dig into frozen ground. That's the piece I wanted to confirm.
Are we asking community members to come out and help
No,
build?
no, this is,
No, we're looking to do this turnkey.
Okay.
Okay, so I think the information has been presented. We talked
Thank
about it
you.
not to exceed 90,000. Item 5C, clean school bus rebate program.
just wanted to ask a quick question, if I could, board member, on that?
Go for it.
Board president?
Yep.
Okay, my question was, when I was reading through the grant, I saw that school buses had to be a certain number of years old, like 10 years or something like that, and I know we only own about 3, and then we're going to be purchasing another one, a newer one, a 2022 one. So are we actually going to qualify for any of this, or is our vendor looking at, I'm excited about that. I'd love to see a few of these school buses electric here.
Yes, so we believe we do qualify. We do have a bus so this would be a district bus, not
Yes.
one for Illinois Central.
Right.
We have a bus currently that's a 2013 bus we believe would qualify. In this rebate program, we would trade it out for the electric school bus, which would be a newer bus, and the cost to the district would be putting in the charging station. Now, we did meet with an organization or a company that provides those charging stations, and obviously these have been very preliminary conversations because the board would need to approve us before we get too far down the road. But we probably estimate $20,000 to $30,000 to put in a charging station for this bus, and based on the research, 10 to 12 years is typically the life expectancy for an electric school bus.
Sounds exciting. Congratulations for pursuing that. You know, I think that's something, you know, it's an initiative, it's something starting. It's going to say a lot to our community as well, you know, that we'd be green, and we're trying to go green, and so that sounds great. I hope we get it. It looked like from the grant that we qualify, they're going to be lower income districts are going to have some first priority, so that's cool. Thank you, sir. Let us know. Keep us advised.
Absolutely, and this is something very new. This came up probably about 1.5 years, 2 years ago at a board meeting or a committee meeting about exploring this option. We did get presented the opportunity this summer, but we weren't able to capitalize on that, so we're bringing it back forward now. Yes, ma'am.
Where, you gotta plug it in. Do we have that infrastructure?
So that would be the investment on the district. So we're anticipating $20,000 to $30,000 speaking with a vendor. We do have to have several meetings after this. So before we submit an application, which the deadline is January 31st, we will need board approval to proceed before we make this a project and initiative. So these are just some of the preliminary information that we've received in meeting with the representatives. Ms. Williams' office has been contacting them to get some details. But we would need to build that infrastructure, Ms. Hannah.
Right.
And that would be our only cost.
Ms. Gonzalez, then Ms. Lindsay.
I love the idea. I think if we really want to go green, Ms. Polk, maybe consider divesting from Chevron. That's something that I know I had suggested a couple times, and it seems impossible, but I think that would be a much stronger call on the part of the board to instead of making the investment in the charging stations and changing our bus fleet, just planting a seed where they might not be soil, but just both and just a little bit.
Ms. Lindsay.
I just wanted to clarify that when we're given the final totals, that investment in the infrastructure is going to be included in the overall picture before you file to meet the deadline, correct?
Absolutely. So this, we believe, was a first step.
Yeah.
We certainly don't want to explore all of the intricate details unless this is something that the board is interested in looking into. We are talking about one bus that is currently district owned, not our whole fleet. Nothing with Illinois Central. This would be a starting point for us. So that if there are options, or if you want to explore the option, we will bring more specific information, particularly when we ask the board to take action at one of the January meetings.
My only question, and then I'm going to Ms. Fabian. Go ahead, Ms. Fabian, you go first.
No, I just want to say I'm really excited at the opportunity. When I saw it, I thought it was a great opportunity for the district. And also looking at the potential for, if we keep going green, applying for that green ribbon school, that would be obviously the ideal. But thank you for looking into the details and potentially applying.
And I know, doesn't the law require that we start to move in this direction anyway? There's a certain time frame by which our fleet has to be all electric, including the vendor.
Well, we can wait until the state funds that mandate. Wink, wink.
Yeah, there's a time frame. Right now, this is another assistance program to convert to that. I don't recall the specific year, but because we do have our own fleet, and this is not the activity buses, this is just the yellow buses, the diesel buses.
Right.
This would be a nice pilot, I guess, before we make that transition.
I think the city is getting a grant too to do Metra for Waukegan.
Yep.
Electric buses. We're going to be a pilot district. That's if that goes through.
That's exciting.
That is exciting. So I mean, it's the first step. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, we have item D, approval to purchase a 65 passenger yellow school bus. The information is there. This would be an additional one, and obviously it'll be diesel after we just had the conversation, but it works.
Yeah, we didn't plan it that way, but We were approved for this in the budget with the additional load, with the additional drivers that have been approved. So we do need to meet demand. I was having a conversation before the meeting with Mr. Sobecki. He did request that when we bring this back for action, that there's the odometer reading and if there's any significant maintenance history, that we provide that information. So it's not included in the attachment, but we can research that if needed and bring it back.
And then I know currently we have, 4 drivers, and we had approved for 5. We never got the 5th. Is this the 6th?
6.
So,
This would be 5 of 6. We currently have 4. This would be 5 of 6.
okay, I just want to make sure we're looking at 6. So now we would be needing to fill 2 vacancies, 2 bus drivers, if this is approved.
Yes, but well, 1 vacancy. We want to make sure we have a driver with the bus.
Right.
So this would be the 5th bus and 5th driver.
Oh, okay, so
So
this,
not
so that's what I'm asking, this is not an additional 6th driver, this is still the 5th?
Yeah, it's just 5. Yeah,
Okay.
this would be the 5th, and we only would have 5
Okay.
right now.
Awesome.
Can-
All right.
One final question.
Go ahead, Mr. Rowe.
I just wanted to ask about the life expectancy of a bus like this. You know, it is a 2022, so just a year or 2 old. Again, I'm just looking down the road. Does a typical bus like that last about 10 years? We don't put a lot of mileage on it. I'm just thinking of diesel again. Diesel, the grant tells you how bad diesel is for our atmosphere. There's no real clean diesel. You know, in 10 years, is that bus, are we going to be able to sell it or junk it? I don't know what the life expectancy is on a school bus.
So it's about 10 to 12 years difference with our buses that we're not on regular routes. So the oldest bus in 2013, it's time for it to go. That's why it's part of this program.
Okay.
But if it was on like a regular route, like Illinois Central, the time span is 8 years. It would require them to change theirs after 8 years, so that would be the same bus.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So 8 years and 150,000 miles.
Yeah,
for
we
Illinois
might get
Central.
it 10 years. Okay, with our smaller routes.
I know it's the type of investment on the schedule. I know.
Can we wait for the mic?
And they said, no, you're crazy.
One of our investments is shared.
No, you're not.
Yeah, it is. Oh, sorry. I wasn't responding to that. I was responding to Mr. Riddle.
Oh, I didn't hear you. Board President, board members, superintendent, I wanted to respond, go green in our investments. We did get your request. We did inquire of our investor, and because the rules are very strict for school districts, that was not an option for us. So I just wanted to make sure that you know that we didn't ignore you.
No, I know.
We did look into it, and we can't do it. All right.
Can you briefly describe why we can't? Just like a 2-sentence response, not a full.
Well, with school district monies, there's strict laws, and even when we intended to set this up, we needed to go through Mr. Tom Morris at the time, and it's huge protections for school districts because we have to invest in things that's protected. There's been some school districts in the past that have invested their money and they lost it. And so we follow board policy, which is really strict. We follow the state guidelines, which is really strict, and I could forward you the specifics on that. But there's certain investments, especially if it's high risk, that school districts are prohibited from investing in. And so I reached out to our investor, who is well aware of what the laws are for school districts, particularly ours, because she was in on that when we set all of this up at the prompting of Mr. Riddle. And she said, no, this is something that we could not do. And so I think I forwarded that response.
And I think the difference between investment and divestment.
Yeah.
Right? So I think what Ms. Gonzalez is saying, we have, if there are other funds, I
Right.
know it was a maturity question too,
Mhm.
where we would have lost some money.
Yeah.
But if it is saying when it matures, put it into something
A
that's
different
not
stable fund.
gas,
Right.
right?
Yes,
So-
and we're doing that.
Okay.
Yes,
Then
we're
we-
actually, you see that on the report that we have. When it matures, it goes into a money market until we get enough money, right, in order to reinvest, and she reaches out to me, and I said, go ahead and reinvest it. Typically, we won't invest anything until it gets to $1 million.
Okay.
And so on that report, you'll see at the bottom, you'll have money market, and that's what that is, when it matures.
Thank you,
We
Ms. Folk.
we still have Miss Hennessy, right?
Ms. Hennessy doesn't work with us for this. We do have Ms. Hennessy, but Ms. Hennessy advises us on bonds and all other high-risk type investment type things. But for the bank, we go through Old National. Yes, and she's very, very good, because if you see the diversification of our investments, you'll see, I just spoke to Mr. Riddle about that. If we go to maturity, we'll make $1 million. And so we're locked in to some good interest rates, as you know, because at one point, we were getting less than 1% interest on our money. And I was talking to Brian, and I said, we have
That's so wild.
50, 60 million dollars in the bank, and we're getting very little interest on this. So that's when Mr. Riddle said invest, and we did, and it's a good thing. You see, if we cash it in, I don't want to be here long about that, but if we cash it in now, we're subject to lose, right? But if we wait to maturity on those, then we gain. And so I'm working very closely with her to not have long investment periods, because if we need the money. But just a short thing, I was just talking to the business office the other day, and I said, as long as we don't have to go to PNC Bank,
Or State Street. Yay.
as long as we don't have to go to PNC Bank, we're not broke. You know, so always look at that treasury report. You see that we have, what is that, $12 million, $13 million sitting in PNC Bank. That's, what is it, Brian? $13 million in PNC Bank. As long as we're not going to that bank, we're pretty good. And so, and we have 2 accounts that we use, well, 3, the payroll account, and then we have 2 other accounts that send Old National. And the reason why we did that is for protection for us, because we have a lot of fraudulent activity that comes through. So Mr. Lawosa, he moves the majority of our money out of the one account that's in Old National, so that if someone, you know, accidentally goes through in that check cash, they can't do us that much harm, because most of our money is pulled out of that account. So if people say, okay, we have checks bouncing, it might be for a reason, because we move the money out to protect ourselves. Right?
Thank you, Ms. Pope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So does that make you feel better, Ms. Gonzalez, for actively divesting?
Little bit. I see Disney on there too. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
That's for credit union movement.
Right,
They have
Brandon.
decent interest, though. That's the problem
I'm
there.
a credit union user.
I have them too, but seriously.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We have our reports here, so I'll go through those if there are questions. We got item 6A, the Wraparound Center update. I do want to congratulate our Wraparound Center director, as well as all of those involved. So we do have, it looks like our first grantees. I don't know, what are we calling them?
Sub-grant?
Well, they call some grantees in the grant, but we call them something else. Our partners. Awesome. So I do just want to say, you have a question, Ms. Fabian? Go ahead.
Yes, I had asked this question a while back and did not receive a response. So I see that we have 3. And when I was out in the community, one of our community partners had a concern, because this came out in September, October, and a lot of our community partners run on a fiscal year that's begins January 1. So at the end of the year, that last quarter, they're running out of funds. And so what she pointed out is that they would have to have a staff member there, and they would have to essentially hire somebody and pay that salary that they did not have budgeted for. And so she wanted to know, is there going to be another RFP out put out in the future to add more partners? Because again, when they're planning your budgets, as you know, the district's already planned their budget now for next year, right? You don't plan your budget like, okay, January 1st is here, now let me start planning for the year. So for her, she was saying, obviously, community-based organizations, nonprofits are on tight budgets. You know, they're not selling for profit. They have a very limited capital, right? And so how can we ensure that we are able to support community partners to be able to join this wraparound center when the time frame is kind of a little bit off for them to plan to pay for that support staff? Does that make sense or no?
So the question is, will there be another opportunity to submit it for an RFP? Is
And
that
if
the
there-
question?
Yes, but it should have been like, if it's going to be for for next year, remember their fiscal year is different. So if we're asking for next year, really they need to budget it now.
Right. So, but I think our grant may work very different than their grant and their budgeting
Absolutely.
system, right? So we have to ensure that we're following our grant guidelines. So I think that the question on the table right now is, well, will there be an opportunity? I know you were looking for 5 at one point, but we're starting here for non-for-profit organizations to apply for the RFP process in the future if needed, or is that already something in your mind that we will be doing?
Okay, so first, hello and good evening, everyone. Board of Education, Board President, Superintendent, colleagues, and community. I'm Bridget Dodson, Director of Wraparound Center. So to answer your question in the sense that because through our RFP process, which I'm here to update you on that and then give you an update for our transitional, like post-RFP, what we're looking for in the near future. There will be an opportunity, so we did have a public process, the RFP, any and all that could have, the timeline is there to submit. We did garner 2 that we're moving forward with. Right now, we are still waiting for approval from ICEJA. What that means is, yes, we prepared to have 7, but when you look at that, the 2 that we have, they're proposing at minimum 2 to 3 counselors per agency. So that will take up the space that we have at 214, given, again, ICEJA's approval, and then when we bring that information back on the January 9th board meeting and the board's approval, so we'll go from there. But there will be an opportunity, so if we have not garnered or procured the number of service providers to be on site, then certainly there's been conversation and planning that we would have a second leg, so to speak, for the RFP. Yes.
Okay, and can we be intentional so that we can try to, as soon as we know that there'll be space, so that way they can start budgeting and planning for that, and for that hiring of that extra counselor, if they need to hire, because that's the issue.
So again, the superintendent alluded to the fact that we're working with ICEJA, and there's funding, that's our funding source in terms of the providers that are coming in. So it's really, we're really guided by them, and not to say open the RFP because it aligns with perhaps another entity's fiscal year.
I think also to challenge a little bit and add to what Ms. Dotson's saying is that it's the responsibility of the nonprofit if they're
Yes.
going for an RFP to budget.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or to have the conversation, right? I would
Yeah.
encourage this is a new
Right.
process and program, and if they have questions, comments, concerns, the individual most equipped to answer those questions is Ms. Dodson, right? And so to her point, is it something that we, even news to me, it was pitched as these individuals, right, would be supporting that staff themselves. However, depending on the grants, the grant cycles, ICEJA, there may be resources to assist. Same thing from a district perspective. If the benefit is to the district and there's a conversation that needs to be had, we be open to it,
yeah,
right?
can we
But the
support?
person that starts those conversations should be Ms. Dodson. So I do, I agree. It's like a lot of people wanted to be involved, but it may not be a perfect fit with them being on site. They may not have the staff, may not align with their goals. However, I do want us to keep those lines of communications open. It's because our fiscal year is July 1. The state's is what the state's is, and it's a
Right,
reimbursement grant. So all of those things.
And there are other layers to that, expectations from our own RFP process. When they submit the proposals, if they were interested, there's certain guidelines that they must be SAM.gov approved, right, to start with, and those other things. So then there's that layered effect, and then there's documentation, which we're waiting on now, which the ones that we have that did go through, and the entities that we are moving forward with, then ICEJA has their own documentation that they need to complete and then fill out, and then they will give us the approval or not. So hoping that they do. But we have been looking from day one at the number of agencies that we have the center set up for, the 7 entities, but then in that documentation, in their proposals even, they're saying, if I'm Agency Dodson, and I'm going to bring in 3 therapists and 1 case manager. So that's their proposal. So that's why we had to kind of backtrack and say, yes, we're bringing forth 2 entities. However, each of those have proposed staffing, and part of our requirement and expectation in our RFP was that I don't want to see vacants, we'll hire once if we're selected. No, I want to know that, the day that we're ready to open the doors, that your staff is present. So pending the approval from the state, as I said, on the January 9th board meeting, then we'll come back to the board for that approval, and we move forward, which I'm kind of going into the next slide, which is the transition. And so we're anticipating that the time frame for ICEJA to get back to us with their clearance is short, and we'll be able to move forward pending your approval on the 9th. Yes, and have people in place. So that was a really big expectation, because I know with other external stakeholders that we have the problem of the challenge to fill those vacancies. We have the people, we want the work, everything's been funded, but then we're stalled because we don't have people in place. So
can I ask a clarifying question? So you said they're bringing, and I see here like 2 therapists or counselors, so they're going to be there full day then? They're not part-time sharing the space? Like if they're bringing 4 staff members, those 4 staff members are going to utilize that space the full
the
day?
schedules, that's also a part of our RFP process, is that they were to submit calendars, what that looks like. If they have a staff person who's going to work part-time, that's one thing, but the main thing is for consistency, so that our clients, the people that we serve, the staff that's there at 214, that we know what's going on. So that's the therapeutic piece, is that consistency. So ideally, you're looking at, you kind of expect that there's going to be a full work day, but there are definitely options to those part-time. Yes, Ms.
Go
Hannah.
ahead, Ms. Hannah.
Thank you.
Ms. Hannah, then Ms. Redondo, Mr. Redondo, would you?
I didn't see you, Ms. Redondo. Go, Ms.
Ms.
Hannah.
Dodson, are you, what are the hours of operation?
Hours of operation, we're still keeping it consistent from the beginning, which is 9 to 7.
What happens, I'm doing hypothetical, that a family needs your services, it's emergency, after 7?
Well, it's not sustainable for us to think that we would be open 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. I was just over there yesterday working with one of our IT managers on the phone system and messaging. And so, like, if you call many places, whether it's a hospital, whether it's a social service agencies, and they will say, if this is an emergency, hang up, dial 911.
Right.
So we don't want to put something out there that we are just not able to sustain. And we're not running a 24-hour kind of urgent care. So there will be protocols in place and, to defer whether it's on a voicemail recording or not. But I would be remiss if I were to even attempt to give that illusion that we would be operating on a 24-hour basis.
Okay.
It's just not sustainable.
Okay, and I just wanted to know, because that I have not heard.
Yes, no.
Yeah.
Mr. Riddle?
Yeah. Again, I know this is preliminary because we're just beginning to set this up, but I did attend a conference where there was a center like this at, I think I mentioned it to
Yes,
you,
you did.
out in Aurora, in their school district, and their counselors actually found out that they were able to link up with a student or family member immediately as school ended. And I don't know if that's a possibility that our counselors would be able to move, and they rotated to different schools so that they had certain days at certain schools that they were like on call if those kids needed something. It's just something to, I don't know whether that's being planned or even thought of, or whether the students would have to get down to that center to see the counselor, if there might be a possibility they'd be able to see the person right after school, at their school.
Because this is brand new for the entire district,
Right.
and honestly, we're doing something that has taken place over a matter of months,
Right.
as opposed to, in general, you're talking a year, 2 years or more
Right.
to open a center. So I don't want to say that that would not be an option. However, we are now first starting with providing services at the wraparound center.
Right, okay. Thank you. And again, it's preliminary, as you said, we're just getting into this, so a lot can happen. Thank you.
Ms. Lanzer?
And I appreciate that, right? We want to make sure that what we're setting forth, we can do so with consistency before we start to add on the additional complications that it can bring. So I do see a safe place. I was able to attend one of their parent talks that they held at the library. They have a great new facility on Sheridan Road in North Chicago.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that they're keeping that location and just having
Yes.
2 additional of their staff with us at the wraparound center. In that presentation, they had domestic violence, physical and sexual abuse counseling. Another component that they had was related to gang life and providing student supports on how to possibly exit the gang life, because I can't choose who my parents are, but I would like to be able to choose what I do with my life, sort of a thing. So I don't see that listed here. Is that something that's going to be a potential layering on in the future once we get a handle on this, or is that going to be out of scope of the wraparound center?
That's a great question, and thank you for asking that. And one, I wasn't really aware of that. What's here is what has been taken from the proposals. This is what they included in their proposal in terms of services. Substance abuse was included in one of these agencies. However, what stated was there was a vacancy for someone to provide substance abuse. So I don't want to, a bird in the hand is worth more than 2 in the bush, so to speak. At the same time, once we get the clearance, once the board approves, then that's when I, as the director, as well as legal, we will work with these agencies to kind of get the MOUs, the contracts together. And then from my therapeutic lens, then I want to see all that they are able to do, and what works best for Waukegan District 60. So that gang definitely, to, I don't know what they call it, but to exit out of is certainly a need.
Wonderful, because I love that you brought up substance abuse as well, because the issue that we're seeing with students in the high school with smoking, whether it be tobacco or marijuana products, that's self-medicating, and that is a
Yes.
version of substance abuse. So I'm glad that's on the radar as well.
And
for our
mental health,
students.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Self-medicating, yeah.
Ms. Fabian?
And then I just also want to clarify, because we do have current partnerships with some of these in our schools. So like a Safe Place also does go out to the high school and talk about safe relationships for the young girls. So I just want to clarify that this doesn't take away from that they'll still continue to partner in those other ways in addition to being in the wraparound center.
Yes, it doesn't exclude, and I know I've worked with as their kind of liaison for the past several years with the Safe Place, and there are different offshoots. So no, this will not take away from that. We don't want to attempt to support a need only to create another at this simultaneously.
And that was my question, and if you don't have an answer, that's okay, Ms. Dodson, but related to CYN, right? Last year they embedded 2 counselors, maybe at each campus or 1 and 1, but at the high school campuses. And I would just get clarification in their model, would they still have those embedded counselors and then add this, or would they be looking to move those counselors to these positions?
Looking over the proposal, it does not say that, but
Yeah.
again, that's another step, another crucial step, is when we sit down and really look at the layers, once we get the approval from both places.
Well, I'm excited to see him moving forward, and thank you for coming here and presenting the update.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you, thank you.
All right, thank you, you too.
All right, so we already talked about the treasurer's report. Was there any question on 6B student activity convenience accounts?
Nope.
And then we even hit on the schedule of investments. So are there any questions related to that? With that, I'd like a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Riddle, second by Ms. Gonzalez. All in favor signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Happy
Happy
holidays,
holidays.
everybody.
Thank you.